What's up, everyone? Boy, do we have an interesting review for you today. We're not going to be reviewing a video, but we're going to be going through a list of questions that came up when I gave a recent talk to Center for Inquiry. They invited me to speak about ways or tools that you can use to have more productive conversations on difficult topics. Of course, that's what we do with Street Epistemology. So I gave a talk on March 9th called Tools for Non-Confrontational Discussions. It was actually pretty well attended, probably one of the best attended talks that I've given online, maybe even in person. I think we had close to 600 people watching that live. But I'm joined here with my friends to go over the list of questions that were remaining. We couldn't get to all of them, but there were probably a good 100 questions left that I didn't want to just leave straggling out there. I wanted to actually address them. So I thought I'd have some of my friends who are familiar with Street Epistemology join me. Welcome, fellas.
Hey.
You guys doing good?
Hey, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm doing great.
Glad to have you here. Yeah, so I was like, what do we do with this list? I could make a blog post. I could do a video alone. And I thought, well, let's get some other views here. Let's talk about this list. So we, the people at CFI were kind enough to give us a spreadsheet of the list. And I think we grouped them into 3 or 4 different categories. The main categories that are important today are questions that we've categorized as, the answer would be go to a training class, which we can give you more information about that. But then there were other questions that were more involved. So I think what we'll do is we'll go through the list of classes. Do you guys want to say a few things first? Did you guys catch the talk? I should probably ask you that first. Did you watch it live?
I did. I watched it live.
Mark?
I was one of those 600.
No, sorry.
You're just standing there like,
I didn't catch it.
Yeah.
we'll put that's okay. We'll put the link to my talk in the video description here.
Yeah.
But you can check it out. So what I did, for anyone wondering, I took the conversation arc that, I took the arc of modules that make up the SE course and turned it into, I just called it the conversation arc. And those ended up becoming my slides, which I think you can actually download from the CFI website as well, if you want to have those slides. And so I talked about the major milestones of a conversation, and then we got all these questions, and we got to a few of them, but there were many that we just couldn't get to. So there might be references to the conversation arc or something that I may have said during the talk that may not make a lot of sense to you if you haven't watched that talk, but maybe you can check it out. So everyone here but Mark has watched it. Is that right?
No, I missed it.
All right.
That's okay.
So about halvesies. That's perfect.
More than likely, you'll be able to contribute to these questions, even though you haven't seen my talk. But let's get through these. I'm hoping.
I've seen like 4 of your talks, Anthony. I love it when you do lectures. It's great. I'm very excited to see some Q&A here.
Even though the talks that I give are fairly similar, the questions that I get are often similar as well. There weren't too many questions in here that I was surprised by, but that's good because these are the typical questions that you'll get if you present on Street Epistemology or you promote it in some way. So I think this could be useful for people as well. Dali, do you want to talk a little bit about our methodology, how we're going to be going through these?
Yes, please. I found 20, less than 30 of the questions had the simple, obvious answer, come to practice. And I'd like to cruise through those with you because they're really good questions. And I'd like to ask if any of you have anything you'd like to add more than just come to practice as the answer as I go through them. Ava asked, I think I expected more guidance in reducing the defenses and being able to talk with someone who is an everyday Joe. I hoped for more ways in. Yes, Ava, that's the kind of thing we do in practice, and I look forward to seeing you there if you manage.
This, though, reminds me, this could be a good topic for a future talk or video, is dealing with resistance. I bet you can somebody can make a complete talk just on tips for dealing with people who are throwing up roadblocks, and that they may not even be aware that they're doing it, but ways to navigate those things can make for a good talk. But yeah, show up to the practice and you go over that quite a bit.
It'll have a sub bullet point, thought terminating cliches, because that's a pet peeve of mine. Carol asks, how do you set up the discussion when the person is probably very defensive to begin with and likely would think you must be asking in order to change them or debunk them? Or otherwise, why would you want to talk with them in the first place? Goal setting, very important. And we do so in practice and talk about how goal setting is also part of the course that we're developing.
Do you guys want to add something to that besides just show up at the training session? That's a really good question, Carol. Do you ever get this reaction? I've heard of people coming to the SE community saying that they've received this reaction, but I personally haven't. And it's probably because I'm usually starting conversations with strangers who have no idea what street epistemology is. But then again, I also try to explain what it is I'm doing, and that I will ask questions. So I try to acknowledge that potential hesitation from the part of my conversation partner right at the start.
Yeah, I think I do too. I think I don't so much get this reaction personally, but I usually assume it's going to be the case and talk to it ahead of time. Talk about goals.
Yeah, this is really kind of part of the consent part of it, isn't it? You should cover you should cover this, and then I think the defensiveness of your interlocutor will probably go down if you've revealed everything that you want to cover and you stick to it.
Yep. Dana asks, what do you suggest when individuals have historical and cultural reasons to be skeptical of traditionally reliable sources? Do you have any, if I'm dealing with somebody who says mainstream media is trying to lie to you, and so you shouldn't believe anything that has, more than 30 viewers, of course, there's nothing to listen to at that point. Do any of you have any direct in on how to deal with
what I usually
source blindness? I'm not sure what to call this.
It's not maybe source resistance, because it seemed like from that question they were saying they've wronged me in the past and now I'm soured by them and I'm not going to trust them anymore. So I might ask something like, is everything that they produced untrustworthy or just some things? And hopefully they say, well, yeah, there's probably some things that they produce that are good and true and other things that are not. And then I'd ask the SE question as well, how do you determine which are the true ones and which are the false ones? And now you're not talking about the source.
My bank counted my deposit correctly all but 1% of the time, that's not good enough. Some sources need to be darn near perfect to be useful.
Yeah, I think what she means from the question would be like an example. Vaccines are dangerous because I've had a cultural history of scientists and doctors in high positions who have lied to my family and ancestors about the risks and nature of vaccines they were asked to take. So I believe that it is dangerous to take a vaccine, and I believe this with a high confidence, and we shouldn't trust scientists and doctors. And I think maybe that's sort of the kind of the question she's getting at.
Yeah, we do this in.
I want to know the motivation behind their distrust and what's motivating that, and get them to talk about why they think that.
Or what are the sources?
Where's the distrust?
What are your trustworthy sources? Would also probably be good too.
Yeah.
Switching to which ones that you
reliably
accept.
distrusting this person.
Yeah. Are they using the same rules to discard and select? Are they discarding for one reason and selecting for another?
That's a tough question, by the way. You can see we're spending time on it. That's a good one. Very good question. All right. Oh, and yeah, some people have said that I sound like Robert Downey Jr., but I don't get it.
It's a good thing?
I don't know. It's not the first time I've heard it.
Really?
I've heard that too.
Discombobulate.
You've heard that you sound like Robert Downey Jr.?
No, I've heard that you do.
Okay. All right. What's next on our...
Danny asks, I struggle to keep my cool with hot button topics. Any advice on what to do if we find ourselves getting too emotional or defensive during the course of a conversation? My simple answer is practice with people who are pretending. It's really a lot easier for an actor to not lose their temper with their acting partner who's attacking them with a rubber knife that they know is all fake. And you can simulate, you can become used to those stimulus when those stimulus are not actually a sign of danger. And we do that in practice. We call it steel man.
This is where you and I are different, Dali. I feel like I struggle with role play. Like I can't, for some reason, there's something about like, I want to know the true, sincere reason why somebody is thinking something. I can see why role play is really helpful, especially if you're trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes and try them on.
What if I were to try to answer for you the honest answer that Mark would have? And I'm guessing.
Right. I see that beneficial for you.
How is that?
So with this,
it's
like,
beneficial for you.
How do we stay cool? How do we stay cool when we ourselves are feeling frustrated because this thing this other person is saying is just ridiculous to us? Is that how I'm reading? Am I reading it right? So like,
yes,
for me, I'm trying to keep in mind what my goal is. And if I let myself out of control and get frustrated, am I going to really hear them out as well as if I'm staying calm? That if I'm frustrated, I'm the one that's closed-minded to this idea. Maybe I should be listening to what it is that they have to say.
I am quite closed-minded to flat Earth.
I'm very closed-minded to flat Earth, right? Yeah. And so if I lower that, my temper, I might be able to. They will see how calm I am, and they'll probably be more comfortable giving me their real reasons. And that's another thing. Like a lot of times,
I see you saying the really good reasons, the good logical reasons, and my answer is addressing the mechanism of how to get our emotions to stop poking out at the wrong time. I'm talking about the practice of how to actually moderate one's emotions by a certain kind of practice, not the motivation which to do so.
Not how to suppress them, but more so.
But paying attention to your emotions can actually be pretty useful. I think sometimes we can think of street epistemology as something best practiced devoid of emotions, but I think that emotions can be a guide, especially if your IL is showing some intense emotions. I think that tells you some things, but also I think the literature would suggest that, for change to happen, whether it's your IL or yourself, because you could change too, you could change your belief as well, that for change to happen, there should be a little bit, some anxiety, you don't want to be, and this is, representing my view, that in order for meaningful change to take place, you need to have a little bit of anxiety, because then it's a motivation to reduce the anxiety. And there's different ways you can reduce anxiety. One, you could compartmentalize the belief, and that would reduce the anxiety, but you could also change your belief, and that's another way to reduce that anxiety as well. And anxiety occurs when you're having a mismatch between maybe two different beliefs, or logic in a belief, or something that's not jiving right, and it's increasing this anxiety. So I think it could be useful in some sense, and I think in yourself too, because if you're experiencing anxiety and you're talking to somebody, and why am I experiencing it here? I think it's a guidepost. It's telling you something.
Your solutions were much more further along than mine, because my recommendation would be just recognize the topics that you lose your cool on and set those aside until you're ready. Practice on safer topics until you can recognize that you're getting perturbed, and you can reflect on how you overcome it. But I think what you guys are suggesting is go with it. And maybe in role play, in your instance, like you use somebody as a proxy for the belief, and then maybe you've distanced yourself just enough to get over the hump. Those are really good suggestions. Yeah. I'm also noticing that we lost Reid, and he's our screen navigator. Oh, he's back. Okay, just in time.
I'm trying to add the questions as banners, so I'm just kind of distracted. So I've checked out, but I'm still here.
No worries.
Grab another pizza.
The next question is almost the same question, slight twist. David asks, if they say something I disagree with is one thing, but what if it is something that defies logic? How do you respond to the completely nonsensical? You come to practice and practice on somebody who's trying flat earth on you, and see if you can take them seriously enough to understand what they think and their reasons for thinking so. You do not have to agree. At no point do you have to say, oh yeah, the Earth could be flat. That's not required. Can you hear them out and come to practice for that?
Yeah, I think it's completely acceptable to say, if they ask you, or even if they don't, you can reveal your hand to say, yeah, I'm not on board with that.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that risks the rapport. It risks jeopardizing rapport, and it can increase the offensiveness. But if it's where you honestly stand, and you're probably not the first person that they've encountered that don't believe what they say. So it's not a death blow to the conversation as much as maybe we worry that it could be.
The more radical the claim,
time.
the better you are on the scale.
What do you think, Mark?
Listening.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I guess if someone asks why, someone asks, they believe that dragons are real and they live amongst us. And I think that would be a fairly illogical belief on the face of it. So I guess that's the kind of question we're talking about.
Lizard people.
Yeah. So if I asked you, Dali, if I said I believe firmly that dragons are real and they live amongst us, and we should all pay attention to these dragons, and I believe it with a high level of confidence, what would be your next? Do you have? I mean, I'm trying to put you on the spot. What would be your?
Thank you for telling me high level of confidence. Could you tell me your favorite reasons for thinking so?
Because dragons.
If we're time framed, I'll ask for your best reason.
Yeah, because every culture has had dragons in it, and from China to Canada.
Okay.
I don't know.
Are there things that are common in cultures that aren't real?
I don't know of any. Do you have an example?
This is the role play that Nathan hates.
Yeah, exactly. So, and yes, I could work for an example for that, and I probably would go something like your ancestors are looking over your shoulder. And it's a common idea, but not. We don't have good reason to think so, and that might also help me find out what other beliefs they have connected to it.
Yeah, in some ways, I find it easier to do this if it's a truly illogical belief or a belief that I have no connection with, because then I just kind of go by the numbers, instead of kind of getting distracted. Yeah.
Yeah. I find myself going by the numbers in all the categories. I can completely believe it could be something plausible. It could be something completely ridiculous.
So if I hear something completely illogical, like A does not equal A, then
logical, linear superposition. That's quantum theory.
You guys should go then. Okay, try that.
that was 2 weeks ago, a talk we had in practice. Go ahead.
If it's about something more concrete in our everyday experience, then I might slow down, and I might pause, and I might consider it, and then I'll repeat it back, and then I'll just make it more abstract. Can a thing be itself and not itself at the same time? And what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, I'd ask, how does that work?
Yeah.
Can you walk me through it? So
exactly,
what I was realizing here is, no matter how wild the claim is, the type of questions that we would ask really doesn't change, whether we think it's fantastic or it's plausible. You would still do many of the things that we're doing in street epistemology. It's just that you'll often hear things that they seem so wild, and you wonder, how do they believe this thing? And it's up to you, I guess, as the practitioner, if you want to pursue it. But yeah, I would say it's game. If they want to explore that, go for it. There might be some value to keeping the questions on the screen, even these ones. Is that too much to ask?
Glenn asks, how do you deal with interlocutors whose answers reveal that they seem incapable of logical or critical thinking? That's the same answer as we just did. So I'm just, that's almost the same question.
I like this next question.
Glenn asks, if you had to talk with a creationist, how would you start? I would start by practicing on somebody first and not go with a real one the first time out.
Really?
Nathan, however, he would just go right in there. He'd get steamroller. Oh, find me a creationist. Hit him up.
What's your reasoning, Dali, for that?
Because my opportunity to deal with creationists, if I practice a little bit first, I will make and learn from several mistakes that I and other people will make, so that I don't waste an interlocutor. I could, if I could make mistakes and ruin rapport for several people before I learned to not do that.
See, you have the privilege, I might say, of having direct access to a group of people that you can practice with.
Oh,
a lot of people don't have that. So that's an option for people who are watching that.
That's fine. You can share mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that I would ask a creationist is their belief that God is real dependent on evolution being false?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that wipes it right out.
Like
because if they say, well, no, I'd still believe in God, even if evolution was true, I would be, it would be tough for me to want to keep talking about creationism with them.
You'd ask that question.
They were an old Earth guided Earth creationist, guided evolution creationist. You don't care
if they brought it up as that's the reason. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
Oh no, you answered. Interesting.
Same thing with a flat earther. If they said, I think the earth is flat, one of the very first things I would ask them is your belief that the earth is flat dependent on your religious outlook on life? A lot of creationism and flat earth almost always seem to be dependent on God beliefs.
Yeah.
And that's an eliminator for me.
There's a fringe edge of flat earth that are not creationists.
There is. There is.
Yeah, they're very few.
I remember watching.
They might be posed.
I was watching a speech by somebody kicking off a seminar or a convention on flat Earth, and the person said something almost literally like, "And we even have people here that don't believe in any God who think the Earth is flat, and we welcome you." And I'm like, and he said something like, "I don't exactly know how you do it, but we welcome you to the flat Earth." And I've been looking for this clip ever since. So if somebody has that, I think that would be beautiful.
I think it's the idea of kind of feeling special and having this knowledge that nobody else has.
Maybe. Maybe.
Yeah.
I still wouldn't treat them any different. I would just ask their biggest reason and I'd just do the same thing.
You got to keep going.
Your approach appears entirely related to questions of truth and unrelated to normative questions about what we ought to do, which are the really tough questions. How do these chats differ? And I'm going to start by saying I reject the premise. In my experience, fewer than half of my SEs are about religion and questions of truth, and at least half are about what should be done. We should have this kind of lockdown. There should be these kind of things for homeless people. I get a lot of should claims, and that's fine.
That's interesting. I wonder if I'm unintentionally excluding topics just simply by the way that I'm introducing what I'm doing and that sort of thing.
Maybe
most of my things are about, how sure are you that this is factually true?
A year ago, I was getting some instruction to ask for claims about what is in the world as opposed to what you think should be. And ROM fixed that for me. There's a series of questions that ROM uses, like if a lot of people agreed with you about this, how would that change their behavior? How would that affect the world? So you can take a should into a prediction about a change in the world in order to get a confidence level on the thing, as opposed to a definitional claim.
Yeah, normative claims most of the time can be translated into goals and how to meet the goal, means to ends.
I'm understanding normative to mean that which compels you, that which you are obligated to. Is that how you understand normative here?
We should ask Helen what her definition of normative is.
Yeah.
Again,
I'm inferring it about what we ought to do.
Maybe an example would be good.
Example would be good, but my suspicion is that we wouldn't treat the exploration of their claim differently, whether it was the factual nature of it or whether it's something that we should be doing.
Yeah. Babies should be protected would be a normative claim.
Say it again.
What was it again?
Babies should be protected is a normative claim. Babies are smaller than adults is a factual claim.
Yep. Sex outside of marriage is common versus sex outside of marriage is bad.
Right.
Oh, okay. Do normative questions always lead to morality then? Are they typically a morality-based thing?
That's baked into normative, what normative means, yeah.
Yep.
I see.
Googling.
James asks, how do you deal with wanting to persuade people, especially for harmful beliefs? How do you deal with weaseling? I'd love to show you by example how we deal with all of those. And mostly we tolerate a whole lot of them talking and then summarize down to the thing we want to continue talking about.
There's a lot of questions in this one. Let's do one question at a time. How do you deal with wanting to persuade people? Do you want to persuade people? There are times that I do, especially if maybe they're holding a belief that's harmful or seemingly harmful or very likely untrue. That's a question that you'll have to ask yourself. Would be my sense.
I want to persuade people to the exercise of critical thinking.
Yeah, you're not trying to persuade people.
I pick my battles and let go of all the other ones.
Right.
How do you deal with wanting to persuade people, especially for harmful beliefs? Okay, that's kind of related. Well, does it become more important for you to persuade if you think that they're holding a belief that's harmful to themselves or others?
Yes.
You had a talk with a guy, didn't you, Reid?
It's hard to say no to that.
Yeah.
Something about medicine. They were opting to go for non-traditional medicine, and they were really sick or something.
I've talked with people how traditional medicine does not. You should not go to the doctor if you have cancer and stuff like that. So I've had a bunch of potentially very dangerous beliefs if you hold on to them and got cancer or certain things.
With people who they tell you they have cancer at the time.
I don't think they did, no, but
okay.
Yeah, they just that type of thing.
I think talking about relatives in that situation, stuff like that.
Yeah, this is a tricky one because it could up the stakes in your mind that, oh wow, I need to go beyond just questioning them to the point where they start coming around to my view. This gets to the ethics of street epistemology and all that stuff.
I let go of whether they're going to come around to my opinion. If they're merely examining it, sticking it out there where we both can see it, that's as much as I expect to be effective.
Yeah, I'm not an epistemological pacifist. I have certain values and ideas that I think are true and good. If someone has something that contradicts that, I want to go through that, Elinkus, the process of critical thinking, to check my belief and their belief at the same time.
Yeah.
So we can both be going towards virtue and truth.
Yeah. I also don't hold myself as an epistemological model or expert or any of those things. My beliefs are as open to this audit as yours.
In an academic sense, you mean? Because I think you probably qualify as being an expert in street epistemology at this point.
You might think so, but I don't think my opinion about something I don't think you should take me as an expert. I think if I have an argument that you find compelling, it shouldn't matter whether it comes from me or Mark or Reid or whoever. I'm actually listing a bunch of experts. That's a bad example.
Weaseling is defined as behaving or talking when you behave or talk evasively, achieving something by use of cunning or deceit for people.
Yeah, some weaseling is great. If I say it might be true that's a lot more honest than it's true that. If there is a reasonable doubt. So weasel words can actually be epistemologically more valid than not using weasel words. Now, there's a downside of weaseling where it's kind of a Mott and Bailey tactic where you try to say something's, well, it's not the best. And you're euphemizing and confusing plausible with probable, with likely, with all those kinds of things.
Maybe an example here would be helpful of like what a weaseling scenario would be.
Well, I take it to mean like an intent to a specific intention to avoid directly answering the question that you're exploring.
So if someone asks
changing the subject or
changing the subject, or maybe speaking for 5 minutes, and by the time they're done, you don't even remember the question that you asked. If it happens, I think I would call attention to it. Seemed like we got off track. And if they kept doing it, and if I got the impression that they were being weaseling to the point of like intentional deception, then I might just probably end the talk. Somebody is asking in the comments if we're taking questions from the audience, but I think we might have our hands full already with, So
we got to get it done within 90 minutes or something.
I want to make this interactive. I'll tell you what, if you ask a really good question, we might throw
clarifying questions.
Sure.
It could also happen to avoid an uncomfortable truth, right? That you're just not ready to accept something that is true about the world, and you want to, kind of nothing to see here, folks.
Yeah, even weaseling is progress because you're noticing they're not directly answering the question, right? So that it's advanced it a little bit, even though it seems like it didn't.
I want to quote from Pine Creek Doug, who was mentoring Nathan, saying, after they've bloviated for 2 or 3 minutes, it's okay for you to interrupt.
Yeah.
Okay.
That report.
Jeff asks, what's the best way to learn this method? I'm going to say that depends on your learning style. For me, I'm example learning. So for me, it's come to SE practice. For other people, it might be read the theory in a book. And so grab something from Impossible Conversations or the new course we're working on.
The course might be a really good way to learn the method. Yeah, we're working on.
Some people learn by example, so watch Anthony's and Reid's and Nathan's. Listen to
Mark's podcast.
Yeah, being reasonable.
Maybe even watch examples where people are talking and they're not using SE, and then you can notice things that might be lacking. That might actually help. But you kind of have to know what we're doing in SE to be able to do that. That's maybe an advanced or intermediate recommendation.
The main thing that got me to learn was listening to myself. So recording your conversations and playing them back, holy crap. There's like a whole new light shed on your personality and the weird things that you say or accidentally forget to shoot your messenger. There's like so much that comes up that you don't know about yourself until you hear yourself.
Yeah.
And
I predict that 90% of people who do that hate their voice, at least at first.
It's hard.
And that's why you got to do it. That's a big reason why you got to do it.
You can get over that. You can get to the point where you don't mind your recorded voice.
But listening
even
to
if you never plan on making a YouTube channel, you never plan on sending anything out there, like for your own edification, like listen back to yourself. And there are things that at least for me, like guaranteed. And I still am listening back to myself after all this time and realizing new things I'm doing wrong that mess up the interview or times where I didn't hear somebody out or didn't listen to somebody.
And I think if you really want to grow doing this, it's really important to do it poorly. I mean, to learn from your mistakes and to really kind of, and it's good to see people who do it well, but it's also good to see mistakes because that's really, I think, how you learn your mistakes and other people's mistakes. And I think we're free to make these kind of mistakes because the bigger picture here is we want more people to practice it, even if imperfectly, just to take a stab at it and have conversations this way. The more the merrier. And if it's not perfect, that's okay. The more you do it, the better you get. And I think in the end, it's just helpful just to try.
Yeah, give yourself permission to fail, and then that takes a lot of the pressure off of it because then when you fail, you're like, okay, I was expecting that would happen. I didn't expect that specific thing would happen, but that's a failure, and I can learn from it. Tell us where to find information on the course. Where do you go for information on the course?
Course development channel in the Street Epistemology Discord is where you can see the status of the course development.
Yeah.
And we expect to have something published in the summer.
Now, do you guys make a habit of posting your failures? Is a question.
No, but I share them with you guys.
I do
need to share more of them with you guys.
So my answer is yes.
I never have any failures. So it's
all right. Well,
yeah, no.
All right. There you go.
No.
I see that.
Every talk I upload, I see failures in it.
Yeah.
Every single talk, there's something that didn't go. Yeah.
Catherine asks, for fundamentalist Christians, thinking is already a sin. Believing doctrine is the only moral thing to do. These are the people who would need us most, but how to get through? That's a good motivational question for SE in general. And how to get through? Come to practice.
Yeah. people who think that they need to hold a belief in order to be good, which is what I think that question was kind of getting to. Those can be more difficult interlocutors because it doesn't almost matter what reason they think they have or don't have. They're still going to think that it's true. So you have to address the morality aspect of it. That seems to be becoming more and more evident as we're moving forward with this approach.
Lawrence asked, if someone says, I don't believe what's on CNN, how would you explore it? That's the same as the question about media earlier. Lamont, how does one become a professional street epistemologist or a volunteer, or what you were mentioning earlier? I think they're actually referencing something you said in the talk, Anthony.
What was the question? Let me go to the sheet.
How do you become a professional or a volunteer or the such and such?
A professional.
Professional.
Put it on the internet.
Are any of us professionals at this?
You just put it on the internet. This word
street epistemologist, I've never liked it because it seems to suggest like it's this specialized discipline when it's a technique that anybody can learn.
Yeah.
So I don't like
it. Also sounds kind of like jargon a little bit. And whenever I say the word to somebody who's like a stranger to me, there's like immediately a stake in the ground of like, there's this word I know that you don't know. And then I don't know how defensive they're getting from just that alone.
Yeah.
So I've heard some people say that they're like, oh, I don't know what that is. And then that's kind of a tangent from the conversation, but it's just a label.
If people are looking for just general advice on how to get into it, you can record your conversations. You can start a podcast like Mark's done, or upload your videos to YouTube. You can write a blog post. You can be the person that does critique videos of SE videos that you've seen. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that you can get into this, but there's not a professional track as far as I'm aware.
No one's going to deem you grandmaster street epistemologist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other than maybe Bogosian and Lindsay, I don't think anybody else makes money on this.
That's another conversation we need to have, right?
Is that the barometer by which someone's professional, though? Oh yeah, we definitely
for
need
the
to.
Olympics.
And then, how much money does it take to be, say, you're professional?
Yeah.
If you're,
Michael asks, I'll have
Go ahead.
Michael asks, I'll have conspiracy theories thrown at me out of the blue, and the claim maker is completely confident in their source. They may call the liberal media, for example. Where can I go from there? This is an overlap of two priors. One is, how do I deal with people who don't buy into media? And then conspiracy theories thrown out of the blue. Oh yeah, we practice on that all the time.
I want to offer a practical question that you can ask to that is, how do you, let's say we both stumbled across a completely new source of news. What are the steps that you go through to determine that it gets the liberal label or not?
Yeah.
Can you take me through how you make that determination?
Right. That's
and are you Australian and liberals are the Conservative Party?
Ooh. Is that right?
Yeah. European small L liberal or American big L liberal?
Yeah, that's another thing too.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the thought experiment in those situations, Just we're going to talk to Tommy over here, and Tommy has this new belief that something that resembles maybe QAnon, but call it something different. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Michelle asks, one of my biggest frustrations with religion is the tendency to proselytize. And sometimes I worry that I'm straddling that line of proselytizing my own beliefs in these conversations. Do you have advice on how to walk that line?
Ooh.
Well, people
Yes,
usually
I have
don't know
simple
anything
advice.
I believe in these conversations, I would say. Would you
Say
agree?
again?
People usually don't know anything I believe when I do these conversations, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Or would you agree? I mean, unless they ask me.
If you do it really well, yeah.
Yeah, I think people sometimes ask me, but otherwise, I don't think they even would know.
I think you are openly proselytizing for calm communication, for friendly, cordial talk, for a willingness to continue talking through discomfort. And I know that I'm proselytizing for exercising critical thinking.
Oh, okay. And proselytizing in that sense. Okay.
Or
Yeah.
the
Because
truth.
So, yes, I am proselytizing. I do have a goal here, but I can tell you what it is, and it's not secret or scary. And I'm limiting myself to that.
That's kind of a negative connotation, though, proselytizing. I think
It has a negative connotation. Same with evangelizing. I guess
mean, if you stick with questions and don't
Right.
make sure your questions don't start with wouldn't or shouldn't, and instead
Right.
start with huh, and then just go with your question, it's hard to evangelize at that point because you're opening the floor to them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If they ask
Yeah.
you where you stand, then I think that's the door that's open to respond. But
Mhm.
if you're continuously telling them where you stand and why perhaps they should adopt your view, then that's probably proselytizing, which is something that you don't tend to see in SE exchanges.
But my favorite videos probably that Reid has done is when I've seen the interlocutor really make a breakthrough in their mind. And then you know that's true because they start asking Reid like informative questions about what he believes and what he thinks.
Educate me now. Yeah.
What do you think of, and then to me, that's when you really know a breakthrough's happened. What do you think about that, Reid?
Yeah, I think you're talking about the one with Dominique, which is just translated into Russian. That was awesome to see.
I don't know.
Cool.
I don't remember the names, but
Yeah,
Are you dubbed?
I'm dubbed. Yeah, it's a
That's
dubbed.
awesome.
It's a dubbed version of that talk.
That's so cool.
It's amazing. It's so funny seeing another voice coming out of my mouth. Anyway,
Oh, that's awesome.
but yeah, it's great to see. It's like we have like this concept of the rapport meter now going on in the course. Maybe that's an advanced topic, but if it's like if the rapport is so high, then they start asking you questions about your own beliefs and values and ideas. That's great to see. Yeah, love it. It means
I just say like, hey, do you have any questions for me? Or because I'm an open book on this topic, do you want to know my opinion on the topic? If the answer's no, then then you have your answer.
Yeah. So I guess it becomes proselytization possibly when you're telling somebody something that they didn't ask for and they're genuinely not interested in hearing what you have to say, maybe.
Yeah.
But if they are and they ask you like, oh yeah, tell me more about that, then maybe that's the green light to go ahead and do it.
Yeah. Listening to so many conversations on Clubhouse, people are just dying to say what they are thinking and what they want people to know, what they know, what they believe. And with SE, it's like the exact opposite. You have to take your ego out of this and just stick to their beliefs and reasons and not even bring up anything to them yourself unless they ask. That's hard for many people.
And I'm thinking of when someone asked you, Reid, about evolution. Now that I think about it, that you had a conversation about evolution, and then they thought about what you think about it, and then you explained what you thought about it. And I thought that was sort of a breakthrough moment.
Yeah, and you through the answers you model epistemic virtues like epistemic humility and all that. So it's a way to model as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Let them know that you could be mistaken on the thing that you are telling them that you think is true.
Yeah. So this is going to go 4 hours if we stick to this.
I know we're at 43
Okay, I'm going to
minutes.
speak.
Let's go.
Paul asks, how do you deal with people justifying their claims with vague assertions that don't really mean anything concrete? And my answer is, that's a long question. Come to practice and we'll show you. Peter asks,
Like, are they painting
digression
with
is
a broad
specific.
brush?
Am I painting
Are
with
they
a broad
painting
brush?
with a broad brush? I was just asking a clarifying question for the last one. Like, are people making are they making generalizations? Vague
I think that's
assertions?
what he's saying that the guy was doing. Vague assertions that don't really mean anything. I would end up asking Paul a lot of clarifying questions before I ended up actually answering his question if I had him in front of me.
Just ask for
Looking for examples.
for vague assertions or deepities, just ask clarifying questions and ask for examples and try to pick out contradictions, and there you go.
And put that misunderstanding on yourself. I'm not following. Can you help me understand this better?
Yeah.
Because you said all these things, and I think I'd still have difficulty repeating back what it is I think you think is true. So can we boil this down really simply? Yeah.
Okay.
Peter asks, digression is a specific unconscious discussion strategy that many use. I accept your assertion. How do you politely get someone back on the main point without seemingly attacking their conversational style? We call those focusing things. That's in the book and that's in practice. And a lot of it is having set up a goal to explore a thing at the beginning, gotten consent on it. So then later on you can say, thank you, and I'd like to focus on just this part of the thing that we're talking about and just focus it back. And not say that, oh, all that digression is really, I hated it. You shouldn't do that. You're naughty. I can ignore that completely and just ask for the thing that I want and not call out the thing that I'm trying to avoid.
Yes.
Yeah. This one's easy.
Yeah. Or that reminds me of an early thing we were talking about, or you said, and then just hop back in. Yeah.
Do it quickly.
Prasad asks, what do you do when the government itself is promoting pseudoscience? I tell them Trump is a liar, and the CDC just fix it. Oh, sorry, that's a very specific example.
The government is
promoting.
That's itself a claim, I guess.
Yeah, that's a claim.
So you just dig into that.
Just
sure.
Vary your information and news sources and check the claims against each other and go with the evidence.
Or,
I think the Turkish government is pro-creationism. Not surprised that the government's going to say things that are not true.
You could also just go to your local government official and have a talk with them and try to work your way up, I suppose. Yeah.
We're almost done. 5 more. How does one pose? S asks, how does one posing the questions to keep their cool when the answers are so contrary to their beliefs? Mark called this one out. It's a real good one.
Yeah.
Well, I think we might have a different opinion on, the role of emotions on in an SC conversation. I don't know. I mean, what do you guys? I mean, do you guys try to aim for conversations that completely kind of a devoid of emotion and not put that in there, or do you try to use it? Okay, or do you try to use it to your?
I don't avoid emotion. I just avoid flying off the handle or reacting.
Yeah, sure. Right.
Yeah, you don't want to be a robot. You want to be, a compassionate person with emotions. But if you let your disgust come through with what you're hearing, I
edit what I allow to come out.
That was just Reid's reaction.
I experienced the heck out of it, though.
I would say I was close to that, starting out for sure, and maybe still, but yeah.
Oh, the robot part. Sorry. Private joke. We tend to joke that Reid is a robot. I forgot that we had that joke.
AI is the best way to put it.
But that can be incredibly disarming in some ways. I mean, people just. I mean, I think when I see his manner, I think people just will just go right into it. And that. Do you see that? I mean, to me,
they see safety in it.
I see an advantage to that in some ways.
I tell myself, I'm speaking for myself only, but I tell myself, if this belief is really disgusting to me, like horrible to me, then is it going to help me in my worldview to get angry and upset and have this person go through a backfire effect and believe their horrible, disgusting belief even more? And, if I keep my cool, then maybe I'll be able to reach them. If I allow myself to get frustrated, it might completely backfire.
Yeah.
If I'm nice enough, they'll still listen to me at the end.
That's such a mature attitude that we need more of, because there's this sense in our culture of shutting down ideas that we don't agree with or we find disgusting or problematic. And I'm of the position that we should surface them. You're not platforming bad ideas. You're exploring bad ideas or disgusting ideas or potentially problematic ideas. These are all potentially, I guess. If we don't, then who will? Well, the people who will try the more aggressive style.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
I think we talked about. Okay. Go ahead. Oh no, I was just saying that. And I think we've talked about this before, as far as not letting emotions kind of, rule the show. And I do it. And I think Anthony might have said that he does this too. But I have a little paragraph that I read to myself before I engage in a conversation just to kind of do a self-talk to myself of why I'm doing this and the reason I'm doing it, and so that helps.
Like an SE affirmation.
It
I
is.
have I do have an SE affirmation. I read it on camera once, but I never
Really?
uploaded the video.
I have one too.
I'm looking on my phone for it right now.
I say, I work towards mutual agreement about the reliability of different ways of assessing whether or not a belief is true or likely to be true. I acknowledge that my guess position may be correct. I am willing to revise my beliefs if they are incorrect. Ideally, it will become increasingly clear to me and my guests whether certain methods can be relied upon to lead one to the truth. I value the truth and desire to use methods that are less likely to produce false beliefs. And I probably lifted some of that from somewhere, but I think that helps.
Yeah. I'm not easily.
Be as you wish to see him.
Ted asks, should I use this on my bestie who is a religious or Trump fan? And as long as you'll change the on to with, yes, I'm allergic to use SE on. But that's a quibble.
Yeah, use SE with everyone.
Yes.
Who's consenting. Especially
Yeah,
friends.
everybody who's willing. Everybody who wants to.
They're going to
all,
respect you more for it.
Well,
yes. Is there a practice area where one can conduct mock SE interviews and hone their skills before going out into the open? Yes. I bet in the description of this video, there is an invitation to the Street Epistemology Discord, where I am involved with 4 other hosts for 3 practice sessions each weekend, plus ad hoc things as you go, and a whole community of people who have channels where you can ask, I would like to practice SE on this, and you'll get a partner, and it's all very clubhousey and it's not formal, but it's rigorous. So it's a great place to practice and to get great feedback.
And
it's audio
evidently,
only. Is that right? Is it audio only? Is it audio only?
It's audio only in the Street Epistemology practice channels, and we have some video channels where if you want to do video, that's totally okay. We're video in the lounges, and we also do live shows there on video. The only reason why we have audio only in the main practice is to get past Discord limits of how many people can be in the room at a time. It's not that we have anything against video.
It's a bandwidth issue, probably.
It's a bandwidth issue and a room size issue. So ad hoc SE with video, absolutely. The main practice sessions are audio only for reasons. Last question. William asks, any advice for a well-read Democrat to break through someone enthralled to the obvious Fox News lie on critical issues? Sure.
I think our answer would apply to anyone.
Or the other way.
Yeah. It doesn't even really matter where you stand. Yeah. How do you break through? How do you break through to somebody who's entrenched in political views on the opposite side of you? Yeah.
Hear them out, because if you don't, they won't ever hear you.
Yeah.
Model the open-mindedness for their ideas that you wish they would exhibit for yours, and then just the regular SE process from there.
And maybe remind yourself, just because my side isn't talking about this specific thing doesn't mean that it's not important or that we're in the right here. Some recent topics come to mind where I remember people on the right talking about this subject a year ago or 6 months ago, and it only recently became an issue on the left. So if I had been paying more attention or being more open to what these folks were saying on the other side, I could have been right longer.
Yeah. Keep your media diet mixed. And,
I'm through my list.
Yeah. So that
Would
was
you like to go through the larger list. 54 minutes in.
So for people that may have just joined, or just to reset the room, as they say in Clubhouse, we reviewed questions that were essentially all related to the answer of come to the practice sessions that we offer. But there were other questions that we received, and we removed the duplicates, but there were other questions related to SE that I think would make for good group questions. And I think what we'll probably need to do is we'll have to watch this and get the timestamps so that people can jump to these right there. Hopefully the video description is I don't know, allows for that much text. Okay, yeah, let's get to the next ones.
Would you like me to read the next list?
Please.
Oh, yeah.
Antonio asks, by definition, you suggest meeting people on the street. Would you ever approach a church and ask if they would like you to discuss your beliefs? Something like ask an atheist?
Well, let me contest the first thing. I don't know if I've ever suggested it. Like, you can do it. It's probably not the best way to practice your street epistemology or explore people's claims.
I think he's saying by definition, by in the name, street epistemology, it's kind of implied. Or,
Oh, okay. I missed that part. Yeah. That's an unfortunate thing about the name. Yeah.
Maybe we can call it park epistemology.
Called what?
Park epistemology.
Park.
No, I don't want to change the name.
Yeah.
Just replace
I
street.
already have the T-shirt.
Just replace street with not ivory tower academia.
Layman.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ellie. Would you ever approach a church and ask if they would like you to discuss your beliefs? Something like ask an atheist. I had a church approach me a couple of years ago.
There you go.
To talk about street epistemology, and I went there. I was literally. I played. Reid. I played your conversation with Tia.
Remember that? Yeah.
In front of a congregation of. There weren't that many people there because it was between. They announced it after the one service that they had. And there was like an hour before the next one. And that's when so there may be 20 people, but I was literally at the front of this church showing Reid's video. And that was neat.
I would love to have been a fly on the wall of that church for sure.
There were a couple good moments there. Yeah, it went really well.
I personally would feel weird about staking out at a church.
Yeah.
In the same way that I would feel weird if there was like somebody evangelizing in front of a Planned Parenthood or something. Like, I just wouldn't want to. I would rather model the behavior of like non-invasive, kind of like I'll be out on a public street, like a campus or a trail. Those are real appropriate places.
Yeah.
If they invite you though, then take it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you can ask for an invite. You can say, "Hey, I have this hobby where I talk to people. I'd love to give a talk on exploring beliefs." I also was never comfortable with the idea of going to a mosque or a synagogue or a church, but I did want to try it. So my compromise was I went to a movie theater that on the weekends or on the weekdays, maybe it was something. There was a moment of time where they had opened it up for people to come to church there at the movie theater. So that was my workaround, is like, well, I'm outside of a movie theater and there just happens to be people that are walking out that may have been at this service. But, again, you can use this approach for any claim. It doesn't have to be religious claims. And I think if you intentionally went, however, there is some benefit to acknowledging that there's specific demographics that you really do want to speak with. Jehovah's Witnesses, Muslims, Scientologists, people who are going to a homeschooling convention. Like that would be fun to go to talk a flat earth convention. I'm not against the idea, but just don't lose sight of the fact that it's a broad tool.
It reminds me of this quote from a manual for creating atheists from Bogosian. I had to pick up my daughter's friend from choir practice while I almost never frequent places of worship. I arrived early to use this as an opportunity to deliver interventions to the faithful on their home turf. That's so pure. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
You don't have to go that hard.
Peter is very aggressive. I really respect that.
Yeah. Yeah. If you find yourself in an opportunity where you can talk to a specific demographic, then I would say go for it, but don't make it your sole focus, because then it looks just kind of like you're picking on somebody.
Well, I went to a mind-body convention, so that was kind of, I don't know if that was considered not cool to do that, but
Which ones?
I went to a mind-body
convention. Yeah.
I went there and I set up shop, and I was definitely.
Oh, I would totally go to a religious conference.
I condone that.
Especially a comparative religious conference. Oh, heck yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's good.
And you guys went to CPAC.
An individual church, that seems pushy.
We tabled at CPAC and Politicon.
Why are we putting religion at such a high on a pedestal. I mean, if I can go to Mind Body Convention or CPAC or right,
that might be that little privilege that even atheists, struggle with respecting for some reason. Yeah, I don't know.
I wouldn't go to a bowling alley and try to talk people out of bowling.
Yeah.
I predict the next question is going to be answered differently by one of the members of this group. Carolyn asks, do you consider yourself a therapist? Mark first.
Raise your hand if your answer is yes.
Yeah, so I am a psychologist, but I don't practice psychology when I'm doing SE because that's something completely different. That is something that I'm doing for the person to help them. And when I'm doing an SE session, I know that that's not something that's necessarily helpful to them. And I'm more doing it for the audience. And I don't market myself as a psychologist. I don't say I'm a psychologist. I think the goal is different. And I know I'm going to get some pushback on this, but I try to kind of separate those two out a bit. Response?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I can use the SE methodology without talking about a claim to truth. Like, for example, I've had some conversations where I've heard somebody frustrated because they want to accomplish a goal of theirs. Mm-hmm. And I'll just ask them to elaborate. What do you mean? What's the goal? And then I'll hear it out. And then I'll ask them on a scale between 0 and 100, like, how hard do you think you're working to achieve that goal? Like, what's your self-assessment on accomplishing that goal? And I'll get a number. It'll be like 60 or something. Okay, well, what is that where you want to be? Like, if you were to try harder, like, what could you do that would bump that number up? Do you want to bump the number up? And then they're just kind of you're just a mirror to them and their wants and desires. I don't know if this is psychology. It's just not truth that we're talking about. It's about them. And in this way, I consider it kind of like a humanist kind of conversation. So yeah, you can use it for other things too.
Dali has a great conversation with Eric Anderson on his channel. Yeah, that's a good one to look up.
Yeah,
this brings up
this.
Does anyone here consider themselves a therapist?
Well, I am. I mean,
well, besides yourself,
he is. I'm not. I clearly am not. I am not qualified to help people adjust their behaviors.
Right. That's kind of the difference. Is that you're using a cognitive behavioral technique, let's say, if you're using a psychological technique to help people change beliefs in some sense, but beliefs about themselves. And, where street epistemology needs to come up a little and that's just because we're new, is that there's not, like when I'm practicing psychology and the stakes are sometimes high. If someone's suicidal or something like that, I want to practice stuff that has been, in my mind, has been scientifically shown to work. And in street epistemology, we have not gotten there yet. Someone's that we haven't got. I'd like to get there, but we haven't gotten there yet. Where there's the research to show like what aspect of street epistemology is the changing aspect, right? Like, could be just the rapport. Who knows? I mean, you know what I'm saying? It could be, but it could be that hasn't come along to. Would you say no?
What's changing? Changing comes from their review of their reasons. So maybe we're asking them to adjust their beliefs based upon their own conclusions from their own reasons.
Right. But didn't you think that there's literature that we need to do actual studies about this at some point, right? No? Like maybe. How this works or why, it could work for different reasons than we think it works. No?
I can trivially prove that if I am kind and don't push back, I can have a very high probability of completing the conversation while still productive, having them still think about the thing. That's a trivial proof. I don't need to do a study to show that. Because the comparison would be taking somebody who's not trained in street epistemology and have them just talk like a normal person and I suspect you'll get half of the conversations walking away grumpy. If that's all I have to prove, I'm good. If I'm trying to prove something a lot better, like what's the efficacy, how often do people actually change their minds and keep their minds still changed or whatever?
Yeah, right.
I'm blinded to that much data.
Well, you don't think that's important? I mean, I think that's important to know, right? I mean, we got to know that at some point. No. Okay.
No, I don't need to know. I don't have to know how efficient it is if I know it's moving in the right direction.
Honestly, I think this is one of the better questions today.
Cool.
I really
We're also talking about, we're going to try to leave the questions up for the duration. And then when they disappear, that's an indication that we should probably be wrapping it up.
Okay.
But yeah, that is a good question. Like my sense is, well, no, I'm not a psychologist. I just happen to behave similarly to one, I guess, in a lot of ways. At least that's what I'm told. But you don't get overconfident with your application of SE and get yourself into situations where you're not qualified to be participating. That would be my advice. What kind of people do you talk to? Everybody.
Whoever chooses us.
Yeah.
We don't size them up before we invite them. We make eye contact. If they make eye contact back, we talk.
I'd say more precisely the sincere. Because if somebody's being insincere, then,
and maybe a little adventurous too. Like I think it takes a certain personality to sit down and talk with somebody. They've got some weird setup. I see cameras. There's probably an eliminating process happening right then and there. You're getting a population of people who maybe are a little bit more, I don't know, confident in their abilities and comfortable talking with strangers.
Yeah, there's a self-selection.
Yeah. You've hinted at using this technique online. Could this still be an effective approach, or is it better suited to in-person interactions? Would any of your methods change online? What a great question by Chuck.
I avoid text entirely.
So much gets lost. I know I watch people who are familiar with SE, and I've even attempted to do it over Twitter and so forth, but it just doesn't go well.
Especially Twitter.
So much gets lost.
it's going to make you
I haven't tried it on Twitter.
What's that?
I do occasionally have requests in SE practice for people to practice formally in the text environment. And it usually is okay. And if anything, it's too slow. And people will lose track of the conversation because it takes too long.
Yeah.
So I agree text is less effective. I do have requests for that, and they are successful. They're not optimal.
It's the same technique. It has worked for me. Yep.
It helps that I type somewhat quickly and people forgive my misspellings.
Is
SE for use only with checking the correctness of beliefs about matters of fact? For example, karma is real, or also for harmful matters of opinion? For example, minimum wage is bad. That's from Dan.
I think we talked about that already. Normative versus descriptive.
Well, that was like, should you do it? Like, I think this kind of gets to the morality. Well, I always use the ice cream example.
My answer is yes to both.
See, when I think of an opinion, it's like a personal taste, a preference. And I just go, if that's your preference, I go with it. But if your preference becomes a fact claim, then that's what we can explore.
Yeah. Important distinction here. SE does not seek to establish the truthfulness of the claim or the reality of the situation.
That's a good point to me.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's about your level of confidence that it is factually true.
Right. It's reviewing one level deeper. It's checking your reasons.
And by
the actual results of the claim can be a distraction.
Yes. It's counterintuitive that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if somebody is professing an opinion, then it's a personal preference of taste, and they're going to be 100% sure that they like vanilla ice cream. So it's kind of silly to be essaying opinions.
Oh, essaying opinions. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like essaying opinions. I've heard people advocate that you can do it, but I just don't see how it.
I have essay to claim.
Your reasons
in which
for holding your opinion
that
are just as valid to check.
Opinions?
Said that
your reasons for believing a fact. And I'm sorry, I'm stepping on you.
What was that, Nathan?
Oh, it's all good. Oh, I have essay to claim that values were objective, which I didn't understand.
Values.
That was an interesting one. Yeah, like there is an objective value to certain concrete things. It was a really weird talk.
So David Hume was just wrong. Okay.
Next question. Would you ever try the conversations/interrogations with 2 people at once? Yes.
Yes.
And I have. I have a video where I've done it with 4 people that will be on my channel soon.
You have a talk with Mormons that went really well.
Oh, the Mormons. Yeah, the two
that,
Mormon fellows. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The important thing is that only one person in the conversation is trying to convince. As soon as more than one person are trying to convince, they go boom, and SE stops, and they start defending and going back and forth.
As long as one interlocutor is trying to convince?
No, I mean person. So we very often can open in practice. If everybody's familiar with SE, we all know how to back off and not divert the conversation into something defensive. And so you can end up having this interesting group SE function. I had one of those on a live stream with Senator Kiwi and Phil. And it was a 3-way SE, but we were all familiar and it worked out fine because we all knew not to challenge and start arguing, even though we were coming from opposite sides of the position. Well, they were.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to kind of set it up, but you can be the moderator between 2 other people. And if one person doesn't agree with what the other person says, you can invite one to ask the other one a question. And now suddenly they're doing SE.
Remember, the only reason we're not expressing an opinion is because we don't want to generate defensive-ness or distract the conversation. As long as you can avoid those things, go for it. Whatever works.
Okay. Well, I just want to add one more thing. The challenge that I run into with 2 people or more is that you can end up chasing things. So you're making progress with one, and then before you know it, now you're talking to this other person, and then you're trying to pick it up. And then the other people tend to be swayed by what they're hearing their friends say, or their girlfriend or their spouse or whatever. So you don't often get I'm thinking of the Mormon couple, the man and woman that were on the trail. The woman was seemingly very open and reflective and really pondering the questions. And the spouse was he was in preach mode and not really reflecting at all. It would have been a better conversation with each of them if it was a 1-on-1 as opposed to 2-on-1, in my view.
Yeah.
Quinn asked a really good question in the comments.
What kind of situations are SE people unqualified for? Ooh, what a great question. Yeah. Quinn should be up on this stage. Do you want to join us, Quinn? Feel free to hop on.
I know, right?
Yeah, the link is in the Discord SE review channel.
Quinn questions.
You guys want to tackle that one? What kind of situations are SEers unqualified?
Person stuck on a ledge or hanging out on a bridge.
Yeah.
Ooh, like a hostage situation or a suicide situation?
A potential
there should be an alarm
situation.
Bell at that point in which you're like, oh, let me dial 911. I mean,
those kind of
okay, but if you were
in the extreme though,
if I was in a pinch, I would call 911, ask for help, and then try to intervene and keep them from jumping off the bridge.
Sure. And you wouldn't be using SE. You'd be being a citizen.
Oh, I got to hear this.
I would definitely be using SE. I would be using many of. I would be using. I wouldn't be. No, hold on a second. When I say using SE, it doesn't mean to impart doubt or something like that, but like reflective listening, pausing, making it about us, that type of stuff. Yeah.
Sure.
Using we language instead of you language.
But I would be the first to admit like that. I wouldn't be giving my number to the authorities to call me the second they see somebody on the bridge or something. That's not my job. I'm definitely unqualified for it.
Yeah, I can be a listener like a friend, but I can't help you fix your life. I don't know how.
Yeah.
The toughest situation that I struggled with was when somebody said, I have this belief and I don't want it. Can you help me get rid of it? And like everything broke down. I felt like I couldn't be good at asking the same questions that I probably would have asked, because like that elevated
That's a psychological thing.
It was weird. Like something tripped in my head where it's like, oh, I don't know if I could use this approach to bring you around to my view, or it clashed. I didn't want to do it, or maybe I could have done it. That video's on my channel.
I've got a co-host, Sleepy, who will often come with claims that he thinks are probably wrong and has less than 50-50 confidence in, and try to talk to both sides of it. And we'll work out the claims in an SE fashion in a practice. This is one of those examples of I have a belief, and I think I want to not have that belief.
Yeah. There are some other people that I don't. Well, I'm qualified for it, but I wouldn't use SE. So I guess it's a different question. Okay. So we want to hammer on that some more? Or? That's a great question.
Well, maybe the question is if you're too close to the question for some reason. Is that the right way to read the question?
When I've done practice SE and I believed in it in the claim and somebody else didn't, then I've recused myself in favor of somebody who didn't think it to interrogate the claim as a way for me to help illuminate something I don't know. And that's for my benefit, so I can learn something from something especially if it's a political issue and let's say I hold some value and somebody else doesn't. This is more of like a practice SE or something like for Discord, but that's my thinking on it.
Yeah, my sense might be addictions also. So if like I experimented where I went out for a week or two and we were talking about fears and addictions. So I talked to people who they wanted to get rid of their fear of spiders, or they wanted to stop smoking. And I did dabble in that a little bit where I was using SE with that, but I don't know. I'm definitely unqualified for it. Anthony, are there topics you are not willing to discuss? I can't think of any that I'm not willing to discuss. Well, there are some now that I just don't want to, because I don't like talking about. I just don't like talking about them. Like veganism. I don't want to talk about veganism. I don't want to debate veganism. I don't want to explore my vegan beliefs. And there might be people who want to talk about veganism, and I'm just not interested. But maybe a year from now, I will be.
Put your comments below.
Yeah, here they come. What do you folks think? Any topics you're
like some of these normative claims? Like so many times, people have sat down at my what do you believe in why workshop, and they'll say I believe in love, and I'm like, okay.
Right.
And we can dig into that, but I'm just like in the back of my head, I'm like kind of waiting for it to be done, or kind of waiting for something a little bit more interesting or tangible for me to sink my teeth into.
Yeah.
But some of my best talks though have been about that very subject. So I just and like, what do you mean by that? And then all of a sudden we are going through definitions, and then I realized their definition's different than my definition. And then we can talk about definitions for words and why they're different, and how we can come up with different definitions for something so like in between us. Like it's an abstract noun. Like how is it that we have such vastly different definitions for this abstract noun that's super common? And then that can go to truth. Like it's another one of those nouns that we should think similarly about, but maybe we don't. And then all of a sudden the conversation's really interesting.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. And the trail, people want to talk about the benefits of exercise. And I'm like, I roll my eyes because it's the third time that week somebody has said that that's what they want to talk about. But yeah, it could lead to a good discussion, or maybe you built some trust and they see you again and then they want to talk about something a little bit more relevant or interesting to yourself. Is there a different technique to discuss religion versus politics? Would you use something other than street epistemology with politics or religion?
Like a political discussion.
One little cul-de-sac relating to faith that is religion specific, because faith is such an audacious claim. But I don't think structurally that there's any difference.
Yeah, my sense from going to Politicon and CPAC and talking to people about politics is that their religious views affect their political views.
Yeah.
So I almost see like the political stuff is just a distraction. And then you can just focus on why they think God is real.
What if they're secular?
Yeah. Then I'd start talking about politics with them.
Yeah. It makes it easier for sure. In my experience, I couldn't agree more. And if they're not predicating their reasons to religion, if it doesn't regress there, then I want to know their reasons, just like any other belief. And then if I hear things like fairness, I'll keep my ear out for that. And if I hear something about fairness, then I'll rely more heavily on outsider tests. I'll ask for disconfirmation criteria, just like anything else. What would make you think that, doing the opposite of what you're saying would be the best idea? What would need to be true in order for you to value the opposite of what you're valuing, to shed light on the disconfirmation?
Politics conversations usually branch off into like either policy discussions or like philosophical, ethical type discussions. Back in Politicon, I think one of my last conversations with is like anarcho-capitalist guy, and we got down to like, I had just read How to Have Impossible Conversations maybe the month before, and I tried to use the last chapter techniques of like talking about moral epistemology, and we got down to his value about liberty and why is liberty the best value for this type of claim. So it can get down pretty deep. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I would use SE on any topic, including political ones. I wouldn't alter it.
Especially political ones.
Yeah.
What do you think of the respect religion response, Donald?
We've all seen this.
I think respect means a lot of different things in different contexts. If I walk up on a chess game, I have enough respect for that they are trying to play a chess game that I won't start commenting on one side's position or suggesting moves.
Not me.
Because that would be disruptive. So I'm also not going to walk into a church and say, you got that wrong, right? Unless, of course, it's an open conversation about theology, and then I'm fine to do that. I don't have to restrain myself in other than like social appropriate behavior.
I'm a little confused by the question. I mean, what better way to respect a religion than to ask questions about
it? When Muslims use respect my religion, most of the time that's not what they mean.
What do they mean?
Oh, you're roboting out.
They mean don't call question to it.
Yeah, sometimes it's a truth relativistic comment that we respect religions and so we're all right and we're all correct. And
this is okay. Yeah, that's what I think that they're driving to is, and I see this so often. Like if I ask a question on a TikTok video, I'll get a response not from the creator, but somebody else saying, "Why don't you just leave them alone and just let them believe whatever they want to believe?" My response usually is that do you think it's important that what's being presented here as fact is indeed justified to the person who's making the claim? Because that's usually my motivation, So, yeah, I don't respect beliefs. This is such a trite thing that a lot of people say these days. But yeah, I don't really respect the beliefs, but it's the people. However, you got to keep in mind that people's beliefs are very tied to them. So if you diss their belief, you're dissing them in their eyes. But while they may not make that distinction, I try to.
Yeah. Beliefs can be like possessions that way.
Was Quinn going to join us? You guys know? I haven't been checking the SE review.
Quinn.
He's not texting. Okay.
I sent him a link.
What's the next question?
Cool.
Any specific tips for rabid QAnon followers and or election fraud supporters? Elizabeth.
Be prepared to be blown off. Be prepared that they will escalate and get defensive and break the conversation.
So
even if you're perfect.
do you have an example on your own? I'm just curious because
Sure.
usually
So somebody starts telling me about the thing, and in their telling, they are getting riled up.
I see.
Ah,
Right.
Prepare that the more conspiratorial or the farther it goes, the more they will have an emotional content, and they may not be able to settle into an SE. And that's not you doing it wrong. Just be prepared that
I think there's
that can
psychological
happen,
reasons
and that
for
doesn't mean you did it wrong.
Yeah.
Prepare
The
for it.
more we identify with the idea, the more deeply held it is. The more I think we need to spend time with wonder type questions and what it would mean if our confidence, before we dig into the epistemology, what would it mean for us if our confidence was lower, and how would that make us think differently, and what would the world look like, and how would the world look differently if we were thinking differently about this thing?
How would you
in that case
change? Would you be a different person?
In that case, I expect a lot of the time for them to argue that it's true instead of considering that it might not be true or allowing doubt. They would just double down on here's another reason it's true.
Okay.
That's normal for people. And they may or may not get out of that this time.
But, you know, to understand, like with the QAnon belief, maybe, or any belief, that if they truly entertain that their belief is incorrect, that would mean, you know, changing their friends and changing their people they hang out with and their relatives. And I mean, there's so much attached to that there's so much baggage that goes along.
Mm-hmm. But talking about that potential impact on changing the belief could in and of itself be useful. It's one of those, like, I don't know what you call it. The outer periphery, it's related to the belief because it could be affected by it, but it still can be useful for getting towards the inner circle of methodology. You just may have to spend more time dancing on the edges and working your way in a lot more than you would see in it. Yeah. Talking about broader subjects and, well, how do you decide what you'll believe or not? Have you ever believed something really strongly related to QAnon and then you came to realize that was a mistake? Like, what was that like? What did that feel like? Yeah. So you're not even talking about reasons and methods, but you're dancing along the edges and working your way in slowly. I think you have to, it seems like when it's a person that you know or somebody who's extremely passionate, you have to spend more time on the building rapport, the building of trust, the identification of reasons and the implications of belief revision on their life and everything before you get to reasons and methods. That's one of the challenging things about SE is that it can be so efficient, you can be too efficient at it. Because once you realize all I have to do is just identify the claim, get to the main reason to talk about methodology, we're done. But with certain beliefs and certain people who are really, really invested in them, you can't be so direct. You have to be working in first gear the whole time.
And when I've made my major mistakes, that's probably the mistake I've made the most is, like, we're good to go here. We're all comfortable with each other. Let's move on. When I've moved probably too fast. Yeah.
And maybe there's some way to test the waters before you ask your larger questions to see if they're ready for it. We've talked a lot about what this belief does for you and how you figure out what you accept and what you reject. Are you ready now for me to ask you a couple questions that would challenge how you've concluded that any of this stuff is true in the first place? What do you think? And then judge their reaction and proceed accordingly. What techniques do you use when you talk with people who are well-versed in apologetics? End them.
I like this question. Because it can throw me off sometimes because I'm not prepared to, I'm not an anti-apologetics person. It's just, if that's their framework, it kind of throws me a bit sometimes.
Yeah. The thing with go ahead.
Okay. I suggest that you can be over-prepared for apologetics, but not under-prepared if you are patient enough. The problem is somebody comes up with, say, the ontological argument that there must be a greatest thing because things can be aligned in a greater versus lesser. And you might say, oh, but how does that greatest thing lead you to an infinity or an omni property? But they didn't actually claim that. They might only claim a maximal property. So if you start asking them about parts they haven't made the claim that you know are coming, you can end up setting up a rabbit hole, and just a little bit of that can derail them very badly, because now you're asking them to defend a claim they didn't make.
Maybe
address the claim they make, not the one you think they're making, because you already know the steps further down the road.
Yeah.
So if you don't know it at all,
key.
you're better off.
That might be a little too abstract for me right now. What's like? Can you give me an example of like? It could be like a made-up conversation of like how that would work.
If I go with the ontological argument, so there must be a greatest possible thing, because things can be ordered greater to lesser, and that greatest thing is therefore the creator of the universe. And then I say, how do you get to an infinitely powerful thing or an omni-powerful thing just because there's a greatest thing?
I see.
If they're not making that bridge claim,
like you're
I can end up-
anticipating where they're going.
I see.
I'm anticipating where they're going because I know enough about those arguments, even though most of the people who would bring that argument are going to get to an infinite or an omni. Some are satisfied with a maximal. So I want them to make the claim before I ask them to defend it. And if I know too much about it, there's a real tendency for me to skip ahead.
Accidentally do counter apologetics. You don't want to do that.
You don't want to do that.
Go with what they're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're a mirror to their mind. Like, help them, explain what they're saying, repeat it back.
You could also ask if they were less confident in their claim being factually true prior to discovering the apologetics that they're planning on using with you. And they may say, yeah, this one apologetic increased my confidence significantly. Then I would explore with them.
Well, I find it interesting. Who I forgot the name. The gentleman who does the counter apologetics on YouTube that we review sometimes.
Concrete Doug?
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's just, I find it interesting because he just approaches things from a very different way. And I don't know, like, what's his success rate for changing people's beliefs who need to be changed versus sort of an SE style. It just when I hear him, wow, that's really interesting. And he just kind of has a different technique that he uses,
I think he gives up success rate for audience entertainment value.
Or self-entertainment.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's another comment.
There's another comment? Which one?
Yeah.
This one or no?
Yeah.
Okay, go
Do
ahead.
you want to respond to it? You could read it.
Go
Read it,
Nathan.
respond.
Rational skeptics do good to doubt that the natural world is all there is. How can we exist without a creator? I have never seen a rational answer given.
How can we exist without a creator? I've never seen a rational answer ever given.
Like, my gut reaction would be to ask a question. Yeah, personal incredulity. Ask a question with another question. I would just ask, if we don't know, like, what's the best answer?
Yeah, it's a good default
If
position.
you
I have
have-
learned my cosmology almost entirely from people who do not assert a creator, and I am not confused by what they teach me.
The God hypothesis is not a mature model of cosmology. So have your God model predict things that we can test, and I'll take them seriously.
Indeed.
Mhm.
If you can make future testable predictions without that component to the model, it may not be necessary.
And then
it's
go
the
to
even
the
odd
check out the SU Discord if you want to have that explored further. Great place to go.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Next question.
I could do this all day.
I'm lost.
We might have to.
There we go.
What kind of follow-up do you do with your conversation partners to assess what type of long-term effect the conversation has had? Franklin, I don't do as much as I would like to. It seems like maybe you, Mark, have more of an opportunity, or maybe you're actively reaching out to them for follow-up conversations. Mine are just sort of happenstance. I've employed the the gear thing to encourage people to come back, and it usually works. But my short answer is not as many opportunities as I would like.
But the question is, when you have that second opportunity, how does that second opportunity differ from the first opportunity when your interlocutors had a chance to think about it, you as well? What is there any things that you've noticed most happening on the second go around or third go around?
Mm-hmm.
My second interviews are always so much better than the first. Sorry, Anthony, go ahead.
My first interviews are almost always better than the second, but the third ones are better than the first and the second. That's been my experience. Yeah, because like the second one, we're kind of figuring out, well, what do we talk about? Do we want to pick it up? Are we talking about something related, something completely different? Where do you want to go? And then maybe, usually because the first talk was good, there's an expectation that the second talk will go really well, and then when it doesn't, we're sort of both kind of let down. And then maybe by the third one, is this like almost like dating? Maybe, I don't know. But then like by the third one, we're more comfortable with each other, and like we've lowered our expectations, and then the conversation goes really well. That's usually the trajectory of 3 talks.
I know the second date's not working well, but if you date me a third time,
it's going to be great. It'll be better than the first time.
In the online practice environment, the rule is repetition. That's not the exception. Out in the park, it's the exception to have repeats. On the Discord, it's very common that people will repeat, and I will report that if somebody sticks with it for a month or two, 90% of them have significant improvement in their SE and will typically evidence a lot more intellectual humility on their claims a month or two into the process. Their maximum confidence goes down on a bunch of things, and they get much clearer about their claims.
Reid, what about you? When you see people the second time, something that you notice versus the first time?
I don't think I've had many second conversations, so it's hard to say.
Okay.
Nathan, yours are pretty much one-off. Well, you've had a few repeat conversations with people. Have you ever used the technique Peter Boghossian discusses in his book to ask your interlocutor to ask you a question in order to model how you would like them to answer questions? I've had to do this a couple times. Anyone ever do that? So basically,
I don't understand the question.
Yeah, so I think this is referring to Peter's suggestion that if somebody's waffling or giving a really long, convoluted response to your question, you could ask them to ask you the same question that you asked them, and then you give a very brief, concise answer with the idea that they'll observe that, and then the next time you ask the same question, they'll be very brief and concise in their response. And I've done that, and it's helped. Yeah. Anyone try that, or no? I guess no more thoughts on that.
Good idea.
Would this work to Would this work to decrease political divisiveness? How, Glenna? Totally. I think it absolutely could decrease political divisiveness, because we need to start talking to people using the terms that they're using and working within the belief tower that they've constructed. So yeah, that would absolutely, I think this would absolutely decrease political divisiveness if we could just make it happen and scale it. The scaling part is the challenge right now.
Power of conversation.
We do one-on-ones, and yes, maybe more people will watch it and start doing one-on-ones, but you need a whole hell of a lot of one-on-ones to make a difference.
Yeah, I'm motivated to do SE because of the current state of divisiveness in America. And I just feel like people around me aren't hearing each other out as well as they could. And so by modeling that behavior, I'm hoping that other people pick it up and start asking each other questions rather than debate each other and beat each other over the head with what they say are the right facts to adhere to and to improve the discourse.
I honestly don't know what the alternative is. I truly, other than having these kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
And I know I sound kind of, rigid in that sense, but I really don't know how else to have these kind of conversations and to change how people form faulty beliefs if that's what they're doing. I just don't know what else can you do.
The Social Dilemma is that documentary on Netflix pointed out a severe problem. I happen to be persuaded by it, that there's a political divide of ideology, and you can plot it out on a map, and it's just growing further apart. And so how do we reverse that trend? Or is it in our interest to reverse that trend? What happens if that trend continues?
Yeah. What happens? War. I mean, war is the outcome of that.
Yeah.
I would predict SC techniques would decrease political divisiveness. And I think a good way to test this would be to see how well the techniques work on Clubhouse conversations. If we do a bunch of rooms and people start to copy what we're doing and they move them into other rooms where they are usually very divisive and heated very quickly most of the time. So if SE has an effect on those things, it's kind of a natural experiment to see what happens.
Yeah.
But do you guys think, back to the question I had before, that we should be formulating objective data so we can show people like it works here? I'll show you that it works.
Yeah.
This is the data to show that it works.
We need that. We absolutely need data, and that's one of the goals of the nonprofit, is to find people willing to study what we're doing in street epistemology, identifying what successes are, and if we're reaching those goals.
It would seem like Peter is in a position to make that happen. No? I don't know.
No, not anymore.
I don't think he's getting much traction in academia. No,
Really?
but
Yeah,
we have
he
people
really
reaching
blew
out.
up his academic options.
Why is that?
With the fake studies hoax.
Oh boy, here we go.
What?
James Taylor. I'm sorry, James Lindsay. I don't know why I keep calling him Taylor. And Peter Boghossian and Helen Pluckrose put together a couple of year project where they created fake studies and submitted them to peer review in gender studies, and got a bunch of them published and got a bunch of them not published, and were intentionally trying to show that their peer review system was broken.
Well, it is, but yeah. Gosh.
And that rather burned some bridges for Peter with
I
any
bet.
sort of human studies boards.
He just kissed his career goodbye. I didn't know about that. Gosh.
To your point,
I'm
though,
of the opinion that was a valuable lesson
great.
for
As
us
a
to learn.
philosopher, he's fine.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How valuable is that for us to learn, though? How self-sacrificial to put your own career on the line to point out a major problem.
He walks when he talks.
Yeah, I'm delighted, but unfortunately, I wouldn't want to try to put his name on a study that has to get past human review boards right now. He's made enemies in that camp.
But why does
There's a Joe
academia? Are
Rogan
you saying that
interview about this,
academia
by the way.
frowns on street epistemology?
No.
I'm
No,
they
I'm not saying that
frown
at all.
on making fake studies and trying to show that their peer review system is it has failed.
They frown on him personally because they made the academia look silly.
Yeah.
All that being
they're
said,
just,
though,
butthurt.
we've been contacted by a university that wants to do a study, a neurological study on what's happening in street epistemology. So
I would love to know that in an fMRI, what's happening. Yeah,
that's what's really exciting. There are people who are willing to take a step back and look at broadly what we're doing, and putting together a study to see if it does what we think it seems to be doing. Yeah.
What do you do if the other person turns the same question back on you?
Thank them.
Go with it. Go with it.
I'll either answer it immediately or ask to answer later and make a mental note to do so.
Yep.
If I want to not distract into my own thing. And most of the time, if I say, I want to address that in 5 or 10 minutes, as soon as we're done with your thing, you can have all the time you like to question me, all the questions you want. And I usually get a positive response from that.
Yeah, that's good advice. I have seen a handful of people turn the question back on you as an attempt to avoid you questioning them. They'll use it as a tactic to interfere with your ability to explore their belief. And if that happens, then I think you need to address why they're doing it. Is this a difficult topic? Should we be talking about something else? Do you want to have somebody else question you? Mm-hmm. But generally, if it's good natured, like I really want to know where you stand on this, how would you answer that question? Then you could either answer it or defer it, like Dali suggested. But keep an eye on it to make sure that it's not constantly being put up as an obstacle to your progress. that is an indication that you have an insincere interlocutor who might be concerned about the questions that you're asking, and they want to interfere with your ability to do so.
Dali, when you hear those questions, is there what's the main reason when you hear those questions, you think that you're hearing those questions? Back to you.
What's the main reason that somebody asks my opinion on the subject?
Yeah.
I think it's because they are used to, when they're asked, understanding the other person's perspective. They're expecting somebody to argue for an alternative position. And before they establish their stake in the ground and tell me what their alternative is, they want to know where I'm coming from so they can position themselves.
And that's that battle versus collaborative mindset that we're trying to overcome. So maybe a little bit of time at the front explaining what your intentions are with the conversation can avoid you encountering that kind of response from your conversation partner. Good stuff.
Have you noticed a bump in repeat customers with the use of the cogwheel?
Yeah, it's been pretty effective. And because I think even though I would invite people back and not give them something, they probably forgot about it. But the fact that they have something in their backpack rattling around, dropping on the floor, it's probably a reminder of the conversation. And then maybe they see me again and they come back up for that other piece. Yeah, it's
Is it this?
There you go.
Right there.
Yep.
That's it.
It's those things. Those are the ones. Yeah. Every one of the people that repeated in the park last year with me, if they repeated, there was mention of the puzzle piece.
That's good to know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's not very many, but like, for example,
it stuck with them though.
It stuck with them, and they talked about the piece and getting another one and so on.
This method seems rather structured to use in everyday pop-up conversations around the table, so to speak. It seems more useful for a planned interview, no? Laura?
They're pretty structured in the video examples that you see, mainly because I'm trying to do a talk in 10 or 15 minutes for YouTube eyes. So there is a structured, plus also I want to make it simple so people can notice patterns when they watch 3 or 4 videos. And it's like, oh, this isn't so hard. I've now anticipated the next question that Anthony was going to ask because I've watched 5 of these videos. So there's benefit to having it structured, but overlaying that structure on a loved relationship that you value can blow up in your face. So you have to relax the structure depending on the situation that you happen to be in.
Daryl Ray is getting good at calling out those structures. Hi, Daryl. Good to see you.
Is he? How so? What's he doing?
Well, he's reviewing SE videos with people that he's talking to on his shows, and they report that he is able to predict what step of the SE is going to happen next. He's good at showing for somebody else on an SE video he hasn't seen what the questioner is likely to do. So thank you, Daryl. Good job.
I think that's
Daryl or Daniel. Who are you talking about? Daryl Ray with
Daniel
RFR?
Ray.
Daniel Ray. Sorry, Daniel Ray. Daniel, of course. Hello,
I
Daniel.
I knew Daryl Ray was into SE, but I didn't realize he was going to that level.
I'm sorry. My name database sucks.
Here's my thought is that it's not problematic if you can anticipate where the questioner is going. I don't think that that's really a problem. It doesn't reflect poorly on the questioner. It's like, oh, okay. They're going to a destination that is the destination in mind. So I think noticing similarities.
I think Daniel would agree that the format is not a problem.
Okay. Are the cogwheels for sale? You can find them on a website called. Do I want to promote the website? Just Google stress ball gear. Let me see if it works.
You mean you didn't punch them out?
Pushy things.
Stress ball gear.
Hey, if any of you guys are ordering a pack, let me know. I would like to go in on the order with you.
Well, you can order them in bulk, and you can even have printing on them. So we could put the logo on it, or what, why, how, or faith, or I don't. Come back, please come back. Print that on each one. Oh, there we go.
There they are.
Thank you, Reid.
$300. Oh,
yeah, they're pricey, but they'll negotiate. They'll usually negotiate
in bulk. Yeah, go with bulk.
Yeah, maybe we should just buy them in bulk as the nonprofit and then resell them or something. I don't know. You said truth was objective. Can you tell us how you came to that conclusion? Blah! Lawrence. I just verbalized the emoji. Okay, so this is a good question. How can we be so sure that truth is objective, folks?
This is
I'd really like to hear your answers to this, because sometimes I wonder about this myself.
Yeah, me too. I actually think about this quite a bit.
To the degree that it is true that the actual ontology of the world is similar to its appearance, then multiple of us can observe the reality of what is independently and come to an objective understanding of, say, the mass of an electron or something. In that sense, I define truth as correspondence with reality that can be observed by multiple viewpoints. So, truth is objective by definition. For my definition of truth.
How about you, Nathan? You're crawling all over truth with those surveys.
My favorite way to think about what's true is to really focus in on what it's like to be wrong, and to just recognize that our idea of what's true is just this abstract understanding that there's an opposite of being wrong, or like the least wrong we can be. The least wrong on a particular subject or an idea. And while words are models, like truth claims are models of the external world, so no model will be the thing itself, like the map and the territory. Like the map of the territory is always a map and will never be the globe. And in this way, it's always going to be like maybe slightly off, though. Isn't there a way to completely misinterpret the territory? And if so, how do we avoid that? Are we interested in avoiding that? Do we care about avoiding that? And if somebody else's map is different than mine, could it lead us to be divisive on what we value, or do our beliefs inform our values in this way? And suddenly there's a lot at stake once we start talking about how our beliefs inform what we value. And suddenly we acknowledge there are likely truths to be known objectively about what we're talking about. Though there's always like solipsism and other things that come up. I see you writing. What are you doing? Are you writing something down? Are you taking notes?
Well, I wasn't quoting you, sorry. But when you were talking about scouting things out, it reminded me of Julia Galef's new book coming out. I think it's called The Scout Mindset. And it's this idea
I've heard of that.
Putting yourself. Maybe you should do a TED Talk by the same name. That might not be the name of the book. I thought it was. But she promotes this method or this idea, this concept of taking a step back and looking and seeing the lay of the land, figuring things out before you start making any rash decisions. Your little soliloquy there was reminding me of that.
Cool. That's awesome.
For me, it's kind of covered in this quote from Charles Sanders Peirce. If we're talking about objective, I think it's close to the meaning of the word public here. Unless truth be recognized as public, as that of which any person would come to be convinced if he carried his inquiry, his sincere search for a movable belief far enough, then there would be nothing to prevent each one of us from adopting an utterly futile belief of his own, which all the rest will disbelieve. Each one will set himself up as a little prophet, that is, a little crank, a half-witted victim of his own narrowness. That's the utility of having truth be recognized as public, as objective. There you go.
Yeah, just try to carry on a society where everyone thinks truth is subjective, and we'll see how well it turns out.
I heard a story of a guy who intentionally set out to live as if truth was subjective. And he started, I wish I remember who the person was, but I guess it just became a real shit show very quickly.
I think some interesting things come from the studying of consciousness, the idea that our perceptions are tuned to fitness and not necessarily to truth. I think those are kind of interesting things to think about, that our physical reality cannot be separated from the mind, and and that consciousness arguably is what connects us to the external world, and that there's really no objective world that's uncolored maybe by consciousness. But I just find it interesting to think about in terms of, objective universal truth, that we've evolved, our reality's evolved to be finely tuned to not what is objectively true, but more to fitness, to help us survive.
What works.
Yeah.
What is the success rate that you've had from Lawrence? We'd have to define what is success.
What's our measure of success?
I define success as I end the conversation on good rapport, and I've attempted to have an SE where I haven't blown it up. I haven't killed rapport. So the attempt has been made, and it was successful in having the conversation come to a positive conclusion.
So based on
I liked
that
what you said last time, Dali.
What was that?
Last time you said, or maybe I misheard you, or maybe I'm misremembering, but I remember hearing you say something like, if my conversation partner wants to speak with me again, then that's
how I
good
test
measure
rapport,
of success.
as an approximation.
Okay.
If they would be interested in having a similar
words.
conversation again in the future, that's for me the indication that rapport went well.
Yeah.
By that definition of success, I would be up there at a 98%. I think that's a fair.
That's a low bar, though. But yeah.
You think it's a low bar? What would be a higher bar? Like, what would you?
No, I mean, like maybe there's a higher bar, a higher standard of success, other than just like having them want to speak with you again. Maybe there's something else.
Yeah. What would that be?
The next level of success would be evidence that they had gone through the critical thinking process. Real good evidence of their success would be that they had shifted their perspective, shifted their confidence, maybe shifted their claim as a result of the critical review.
Yeah, moments of aporia, or I've never thought of that before. Those are really good for me to hear.
Yeah. If it's only aporia, 90%. If it's the other standard, I only know about 50%.
I've asked people about God, religion, and why they believe in something with little to no evidence, and I've received answers such as, it's just a feeling I have, or I know it in my heart to be true. What are good follow-up questions to respond to such as these?
Well, it's the application of those same reasons or methods on other avenues of your life, and if they reliably bring you to the truth of the matter.
This is why I like to get more than one claim on the table when I do a long form interview, because usually I'll get like one claim is, I believe that souls exist or something to that effect. Another claim could be, I believe the election was stolen. And the third one could be the earth is flat. So I have like a spectrum of things to compare it to and see if their feelings that they use for the soul could be a reliable way to know whether or not the election is stolen. And if the answer is no, then I would like to know why their standard is different for one and not the other. And could it be that one would lead you astray if somebody had the reverse of that and used their feelings to conclude that the election was or was not stolen? Could they be mistaken on those grounds? And if so, how do we then look at our idea about a soul?
Yeah, I like that. It's good. It's kind of the play on the even or odd. Is feelings the best way to know whether something is even or odd in your even or odd example that we all probably use?
Yeah. This is usually where they say, well, when the claim is more important to you or it has a bigger impact on your life, that's when your feelings work better or something. They'll usually find a way to equivocate or justify
the standard being different.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Which then you can still explore. Well, if this belief really carries more weight for you, are you satisfied with going off of feelings when we recognize, because of the other examples, that it can't be as reliable as maybe you think that it is? Okay.
I notice we are at 2 hours. We have roughly 24 questions remaining. That would take roughly 1 more hour. Would we like to power through or call a part one, part two? I'm fine to power through myself.
I'm fine for another hour.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Okay. Jordan Peterson and Matt Dillahunty had a non-confrontational discussion about God. Late in the discussion, with no resistance, Dr. Peterson told Matt that he wasn't an atheist. He only thought he was. Don't ever do that to Matt. Let me just tell you, that's not a good way to maintain rapport. I appreciated Matt's strong comeback. How would you have responded to Dr. Peterson's assertion? I threw that last word in there. And this is from Mark.
What leads you to believe that you know my mind better than I do?
Right.
That would seem
How
like
do
a
you know
defensive making question, but it's a real SE question. What
Yeah.
leads you to that conclusion?
Are there other beliefs that you think I hold better than this one? And what would that be?
Ooh, let's play it. Let's play it. This is sweet.
Oh,
Let's
yeah.
play it. Yeah.
I don't have
That's
Gotta
the
wrap
rest
it up.
It's just for background.
How do you know the spot?
Oh, okay. Okay.
I don't know where the spot is.
Oh, okay. You just okay.
Yeah, we don't want any copyrights or anything going on here.
So
But there
we'll-
is- There are
Let's put a link
situations
to that.
when you can know someone's mind better than that person knows their mind in a certain situation.
maybe with kids, like I know my daughter's really, really tired and she does not need to play another hour on the playground. It's time to go home. There are instances there, I suppose, but this is an adult talking to an adult. How dare
I feel
you
this is one of
phrase
those.
something-
Yeah, I feel deeply triggered when people tell me that I think a certain way when I don't think that way. That's one of the better ways to trigger me. So
And what I'm really curious is, did Peterson have any hesitation whatsoever before he made that assertion, or did he tentatively surface that? If it was confidently projected, then I think that's even more problematic, maybe than what he was actually saying. Like, my
It was
goodness, man.
confident as fuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So can we
Everyone
get back
should
to
see this if they haven't
question?
seen it. It's great.
What was the?
Yeah. What's the question?
How would you respond to that type of assertion on your own views? I think was the question.
A real risky way, and it's real risky, could be, an outsider test for this. If I were to, it's super risky. I almost hesitate to even say this, but you could just say, if I were to characterize your beliefs that you thought something one way when you really thought a different way, or you felt that you thought a different way, how would that make you feel? Or how would you think about my characterization of your views? Or how would you could just challenge it by flipping it. It's real risky though, because now all of a sudden you're fighting rather than hearing each other out. But man, I'm so triggered by that. So I just go straight to that.
let's try steel manning Peterson's position a little bit. Why don't we try that?
Okay.
Like maybe he has an unusual What's wrong, Dali? You're freaking.
No, I'm just like, oh, this is fun. Let me see.
I mean-
let me see if I can try that on. I'm trying.
Maybe Peterson has a unique definition of the word God, to which Matt really does adhere to,
Mm.
and
Like
thinks is
goodness.
actually real,
God is goodness.
or the universe, right?
And,
Like
since
God
you're,
is-
and since you're good, you must
Yeah.
be.
So if Jorgensen defines God as the totality of all there is, or something, within the observable universe.
Yeah.
And that
If he
that's what
defines
means.
theist as somebody who wants good, okay, I'm a theist.
Yeah. If anyone ever
Not usually
talks
what
to
people mean,
Peterson, work out your definitions in advance with that one in particular.
One of my favorite books is Everybody is Wrong About God by James Lindsay. And he has an alternative way of conceptualizing the word God. He uses it to mean like an alternative way to make sense of God is that it's just an idea that human beings use to manage their psychosocial needs. So that's just one option for conceptualizing God. And that, Peterson is a clinical psychologist, so I assume that might be something he's talking about.
The problem, though, is that the people who listen very closely to what he says are not going off of that definition of God. It's their own personal God that they think he's endorsing. That's my sense. And that's all they need to see an ally in him, I think.
Yeah, Peterson is very mythological. He thinks of God as like a character. So if that character exists and it's like like the pinnacle of virtue and goodness. If we don't believe in that, we're kind of equivocating to we don't believe in virtue and goodness. So if you're not that person, then you're not an atheist. It's like we have to switch out these words and definitions to make it.
Yeah. Peterson's definition of atheist would also be curious to hear. I wonder if he gets into that with that talk with Matt.
Peterson also talks about he kind of redefines truth. Like he says truth is something, it's that which persists in embodied reality or something to that degree. To that effect.
I thought he more attributed it to, and maybe he lumps this in with that, but that which gives us value. That is, I think, more closer to his definition of truth than what you said.
Utilitarian maybe tied with popularity.
Yeah,
but I think utilitarian
it's not about correspondence.
Right, not about correspondence.
Yeah, it's about value for him.
Right.
Okay.
What's the next one?
Good question. Oh, by the way, most of these questions are not the answer. Go to training class. Go to the training sessions that we offer.
Right, that was the first one.
These are a little bit more advanced, but in no particular order. Well, they might be in alphabetical order by person's first name. Do you consider yourself a deprogrammer? If so, can I hire you to talk to my 60-year-old Q niece? I can't tell you how many people have reached out to me to say, can you help me with this specific situation? By which I then say, I'm so sorry, I don't have the time, but there's communities of people who are in your exact situation who are learning this approach to try to figure it out. And then I give them a whole bunch of links to go to those places.
So I will speak from the community and say, I am not a deprogrammer. No, you may not hire me. And I am happy to speak to your niece if she wants to talk to me.
Right. You want to do that, huh?
Sure. I'd be happy to speak to anybody, anybody who volunteers.
Yeah.
What have been some of the biggest challenges in your journey of becoming a better street epistemologist or conversationalist in general? Any tips to overcome those challenges? Miko.
Oh, that's a good one. Getting the courage to get up there and record yourself and get consent to record other people, especially if it's quite literally on the street, because then you feel really weird. There's like this, what am I doing right now kind of feeling. And then like cutting through that, like, oh man, am I a weirdo? Because I'm like literally just inviting conversations with strangers. Though you get through that really quick because you start to realize there's probably no better way to like become acquainted with a stranger. Cutting through that, and then also the listening back to yourself on the audio recording, which for me has been the most beneficial out of all of this. Like the amount of self-reflection for myself on how to ask other people questions has really been beneficial to me. So if you can stomach hearing yourself speak and making lots and lots of mistakes along the way, so that way you can learn from them and do better next time.
Yep.
That's the biggest challenge, I'd say, for myself.
Great, Nathan. Yeah. Listen to your mistakes.
Yeah. Don't let the mistakes bother you too much to the point where you're scared to continue progressing. And by the way, I just started editing the video with Edgar. He's the Christian that has the drone and he flies it overhead and then he comes back. He watches a couple videos and then he does SE. And I was just watching the footage because I'm editing it up. And there's about 3 minutes or 4 minutes where he's just out there with the whiteboard. I'm gone. He takes my whiteboard and he's doing SE. And I was thinking, do I cut this part or leave it in? And I think I'm going to leave it in. I want to leave that 4 minutes of struggle in there of him to find somebody, because I want the viewers to empathize with him, you know, and be like, oh, he stuck it out and he ended up having a really good talk because he did that.
That'll be awesome.
Yeah.
Can't wait for that.
Yeah, just stick with it. Have you ever changed your mind as a result of one of these conversations, Nirev? Yes.
Lots of the time. Yes.
It's happened. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Especially in practice, people will come in with relatively, okay, sometimes we get some wild claims, but people will often bring a relatively banal claim, and I'll learn something new. So I didn't think they were wrong before, but I didn't know about it. Does that include in changing my mind? Those are easy.
I'm sure
I've
people
also
want to hear some examples.
had people convince me to change my mind based on what they brought.
I'm trying to think of an example.
My mind usually changes on many things. It's not necessarily the topic at hand. It might be, I need to be a little bit more gentler the next time I ask that kind of question. Like, so my mind is changing on all sorts of different aspects. Although I suspect that this question is intended, is related to the discussion or the topic at hand.
I had a geological engineer come in and do an essay on the subject of fracking. And my overall political opinion of fracking hasn't changed much, but it's much more nuanced. My opinion is much more nuanced than it used to be.
Excellent. When talking about truth, what do you think about the postmodern view that truth is a property of language? Man creates language, therefore man creates truth. Perish.
Is that Rorty, or just trying to think of where that comes
Richard
from?
Rorty, yeah. It's like the truth is out there, but we can't access it. We're kind of stuck in our language games. There's a
My correspondence definition of truth pulls the teeth on this.
How so?
Because it's not just about the words you use. We could speak completely different languages, but our math is going to end up being the same, even if you're using Roman numerals and I'm using Arabic. Some things are constrained by reality, and any accounting system that can be accurate can be used. It doesn't matter what numerals. It doesn't matter what words you use to build it up if you're checking against reality.
Yeah, Tic-tacs.
Tic-tacs to the rescue on this one.
Yeah.
Could you talk about some possible responses from the other person to the question, how could we verify if this is really true? So what kind of responses would do we typically see when we ask them, how can we verify that this is really true? I've heard thousands of different responses to this question. Some people say it doesn't matter. Some people say, go with your gut, run a test, go with what you think is the best. I mean, there's all sorts of different responses. Probably the more important thing is, how do you respond to the response that they're giving, rather than coming up with a list of responses to this one?
Yeah. There's a really common list of responses that happen in practice. Once people have seen other people's responses, they will often say, a study that shows the result is X. How do you know this policy is a good idea? If there became a natural example where we could observe that X and Y leads to Z with enough statistical confidence that, and so on. They'll answer something that is like middle of the road, really simple epistemology, good reason to believe something, and leave it at that. That's common.
Maybe in your training sessions, perhaps, where there's people who are familiar
common
with
in the
SE.
training sessions.
Yeah.
Out in the park, that's 10%. In the training sessions, it's 30%, 50%.
Do you ever get an unusual answer to this question, Nathan? I'm curious, with all your survey questions.
It's always different. I mean, this is like kind of almost too vague for me to answer, because I'm really just listening to what they're saying would change their mind or how they came to know it. And then I ask them if that's the best way to know.
Yeah. Here's the danger, though. If Paul asked this question so that they can be prepared when they get these responses, that's probably the wrong way of thinking about SE. Like, you don't really need to do much prep other than just to prepare yourself to take yourself out of it and listen to what they're saying as honestly as possible. So you don't need to do a lot of planning.
I'd say
Sunday, I had a claimant.
The test.
Go ahead.
Just to wrap up, and then I'll be done. If they have a test or they say they've tested a thing, it's really important to me that I know that this test can both pass, which is already established because they used it, presumably, to conclude their conclusion, but that also this test has a failure component too. And I want to know whether or not they could identify a failure of this test if it happened. Or is there some way in which the test can show them the answer they don't want to see, maybe, or and something that could reveal that it's not true. And if the test doesn't have that quality, if it only ever affirms the belief, but under no conceivable situation could it ever disconfirm the belief, then I want to call into question the test itself. Is this really a good test? Or is this a way to confirm our idea in a biased way? And shed light on that.
Yeah. And when it comes
Sometimes
to
the answer to the question is not great. I had a claimant on Sunday in practice say that human civilization is approximately 1,500 years old, perhaps closer to 1,200. And the primary reason to verify that is because we can't know, we don't have a good chain of evidence on the documents that show it's older. But we do have lots of examples of somebody forging documents to make something seem older. Therefore, because we don't know, it's a tenth as long as we expect it to have been. And never mind, yes, I do recognize that that means radioactive dating has to be wrong, and also the length of day being 24 hours or not also has to shift over the last 1,000 years. So sometimes the answers are not great.
Mm-hmm. Another way to conceptualize a test rather than like positive and negative results, but like results that are consistent with the hypothesis or inconsistent with the hypothesis. If the hypothesis is true, you would expect this. If we do a test and we don't find it, or we find something very different, that's something not consistent with the hypothesis, and that makes us
great point.
Yeah, that's the type of way I think about it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Should the conversation arc be modified when the conversation is with a really close friend? So the conversation arc is a reference to the talk that I gave to CFI, which we'll have a link to. And I basically took all the modules that make up the SE course, most of them, not all of them, and then called it the conversation arc. Would you ever modify that? The arc doesn't really change, but the amount of time you spend on each step maybe changes. We kind of hinted at that about the QAnon discussion. Like you might want to spend more time building trust, rapport, listening, active listening, reflective listening, before you spend time on the reasons and method, for example. And that probably carries over to the familiarity of your conversation partner. The more they know you or your position, you probably can't afford to spend more. Well, what am I trying to say here? You probably have to spend less time in reasons and methods when the person knows you more. That seems to be the case. But the arc itself, I don't think it would change that much.
I can think of counterexamples of people who I have that are close in my life where I would have to spend 2 or 3 times as much effort on maintaining rapport on a topic. And I know that because I know them really well compared to a stranger. So it can go the other direction. I think it's more about how much emphasis on rapport versus this or that. I agree that the arc wouldn't change. It would just be emphasis.
But that's just because they just happen to be being questioned by you. But if it was a complete stranger, I wonder if they would be more charitable with the bluntness of the conversation and be a little bit more forgiving with the lack of that attention that you would be giving, and still stick with it and allow that person to question them. This gets to something that I've been thinking, that it's not a hard and fast rule, of course, but maybe the more familiar you are with the person, the less opportunity there would be to do an SE talk with them, or at the very least, the amount of time that you have to spend with them. There's an algorithm, or there's an equation of sorts here that you have to spend more time on the softer elements of SE, the more familiar you are with the person that you're questioning. It seems like there's something to that, because there was a post in the SE Discord just now. Maybe I'll read it. It was under SE advice. Let me pull it up here. Yeah, I have it.
I think that
right here.
Conversations with close friends are an even better opportunity to really get at the root of why somebody thinks something. The only thing that I would say is make sure that your priority is the friendship. I mean, or if your priority is the friendship, then just bear that in mind while you're going through the talk with them, that you're there together to figure out their idea. Yeah, if you want a good example, I have my talk with Abram, who's a close friend of mine. We do 4 interviews and they're all like 2 hours long. So if you want to see what that's like, check it out on my channel.
Yeah. There might be something to this, and this could probably be tested, but there's some relationship between the familiarity of the questioner to the amount of time you need to spend on these stages of the conversation arc. This person
like I had to spend a lot more time.
Seems counterintuitive, but yeah,
it does seem counterintuitive. Yeah, you would think it would be the complete opposite. You can get right to the reasons and method, but it doesn't seem to be the case.
So even though I have a 98% success rate, there's a lot of close relationships I would not be willing to risk a 1 in 50 chance. So my solution in that case is to externalize, to delegate, to ask somebody else who's an SEer to do the SE. Because if they nuke their relationship with my friend, that's not going to hurt me.
Right. Maybe that's it. Maybe because both of you sense that there's a lot at stake to the relationship if you explore this topic in this way. Maybe that's the barrier that's really slowing you down. So if you take that element out of it, perhaps.
Yeah, I'd much rather have somebody else SE my neighbor.
Yeah, we did see an interesting workaround about a year ago. We were doing, there was a guy who interviewed his sister in his backyard, but he was the moderator basically, and people from the SE community were on a Discord channel listening and then typing questions, and then he would select the question to ask his sister. And I thought that was a unique take on
like that,
taking yourself out of it when it's a relationship that you value because of that barrier that we were just talking about.
Was that Campfire Combos?
Mm-hmm.
I modeled my channel after that.
Oh, wow.
My live streams operate that way, where the live people in the Discord ask questions and I select from them. About half the questions I ask come from other people typing them.
Yeah. Because I guess from the perspective of his sister, it wasn't him asking the questions. He was the facilitator selecting the best question, hopefully from her mind, taking into account the relationship that he cherished with her and not picking gotcha questions, but picking really good ones. And there might be something to that.
I've had some guests, I think, cut me more slack because it was somebody else asking.
Yeah. Do you think you're positioning yourself as the dominant partner in the conversation, asking permission to continue and giving a heads up that you can rock their world, etc.? Seems to do that. Yeah, this is a concern that I have. Like I do think I'm out here with my camera conducting interviews, and I'm looking for people to let me interview them. So there's a leadership role that you're not starting off as equals, but you want to try to explore their belief as equals. So you're already starting from a troublesome spot as you being the dominant person, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a 25-year-old out there with your camera and a 50-year-old walks up, that's not necessarily the case. But if you're a 50-year-old and you're interviewing 25-year-olds, that very well could be the case. So age could be a factor, the type of clothing that you're wearing, the topic that you're talking about, your race, your gender. These are all factors that come into play here, I think.
I've thought of this before. I've even sat in a chair that was lower than my conversation partner just so I didn't seem to rise above them. I've actually done that before. So
nice.
Yeah, it's something to keep in mind.
I've leaned down to make myself not as tall for some people.
Mm-hmm.
But who knows what they're interpreting when I do that? Like, oh,
it's the flip-flops gets people to relax.
We should also
in Runyon Canyon, we have a slope. So we always put the questioner on the downside of the slope for that reason.
On the downside of the slope? Why would you? I would think you want to elevate them.
Elevate them, yes. The questioner, that's me. The interrogator, I put on the low side of the table.
Sorry, yeah, confused them.
Yeah. And the main thing I'm concerned about are power dynamics that are outside the conversation.
Yes.
If I was your landlord No,
Boss,
get somebody else to do
employee,
it.
Wow, yeah.
maid. Yeah. Do you really want to SE your house cleaning crew when they're going to probably be deferential to you to begin with? No, like I don't want that. And you can point those things out before you get into it to try to mitigate it, but it's still there.
Yeah, if you're somebody's boss, please don't interrogate your employees too much.
Even if you're at the bar after work and you're no longer boss and employee.
And please don't be the one to assign them an SEer person, because the power transfers.
Maybe just bear it in mind and air it out. Like, hey, if I were to have this conversation with you, I'm your boss. Like, would you feel weird? Like if I asked you questions about this idea, like, or if I challenged your views on this, maybe just like be transparent about it.
Yeah, talk about it. Put it out in the open.
Just something to be thinking about.
But I do think these power differentials do play into more than we sometimes realize, and consider the conversations in very different ways, just depending on where you do the interview, even, yeah.
I've got a talk coming up with Shannon Q. She wants to talk about conversational ethics. And I've written down a few things to talk about, and power dynamics is one of them. I think we need to explore how that's a factor in these conversations. And I don't think it shouldn't be. You should try to minimize that dynamic as much as you can.
This could be especially difficult if you're talking about identity and you happen to be somebody who is aligned or not aligned with one of the identities in question.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful in those situations just to talk about that like you just did? I mean,
I think so.
Yep. You have to be transparent about that too.
Look, all right.
Yep.
Can you talk about the principle of charity, Scott? Good thing to do. What is the principle of charity? It's assuming someone is what is it?
Interpret your partner in words in the light that makes them look the best.
I thought it was something to do with benefit of the doubt.
Yes.
I could be mistaken. Like
if
when
they're
you
rounding,
first hear
don't
something,
correct them. If
somebody
you can
says that they
understand
own
a
a
term, yeah, if they use a term and one of the definitions kind of is nonsensical, but the other definition kind of makes sense, assume they mean the kind of makes sense definition. Maybe ask them, but assume the best of their communication. Read it in the kindest way first.
Yeah, it's
the principle of charity, it says on Wikipedia, the principle of charity requires interpreting a speaker's statements in the most rational way possible, and in the case of any argument, considering its best, strongest possible interpretation. This is Rappaport rules. This is Street Epistemology.
It's like steel manning, not straw manning.
Yeah. The frustrating thing, though, is when your conversation partner, either they don't recognize that you're doing it, or they don't do it back to you. So like the Peterson quip about Matt not being an atheist, or I don't know exactly remember what it was. Like that wasn't a question or a statement coming from a place of charity. Peterson should have asked Matt
good
a question rather than asserting it. And so that's an example where charity wasn't happening, I think. It seems to me that it is important to the entire process to question your own self first before you enter this process with someone else. Your thoughts on this? Stanley.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Modeling the behavior of an open mind. And if you're going into an interview with somebody and you're asking a skill question, I would say think in your own mind where you might be on that scale too. And if you're asking what it would take to slide on the scale, while you're thinking about it, maybe consider what it would take for you to slide in the opposite direction to match your conversation partner. Apply an outsider test to yourself of these questions before you just go with asking them. Yeah. Maybe a good idea.
Definitely ask yourself, what's motivating you to do this? Why do I care what these other people think? Am I open to changing my mind? Yeah, this kind of gets also to that affirmation that we talked about just briefly too, like having a little quick dialogue with yourself about what you're attempting to accomplish can help pull yourself out of it and make it about them. Yeah.
Yeah, if you consider yourself closed-minded on an issue,
should you really be questioning
maybe,
others about it? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You should know why you do SC to begin with. I mean, what is your motivation for, having these talks? And they can differ. I mean, I think the five of us would probably differ on why we do this publicly, right? And it's just good to have a handle on that, I think.
Also, if you don't do this step and you go out to do SE, you'll probably find yourself doing this step. You'll start to wonder why you're doing it and what's motivating you.
Oh, yeah.
So even if you forget to do it, it'll come back to you when you start realizing how powerful your questions can be on some of these claims people make. How many more questions do we have left, roughly, would you say?
1, 4, 5, 6, 15.
Have you noticed a denomination or religion that seems harder to SE with? I have.
What's your favorite?
The hardest.
Well, I hesitate to say this because then people think that they're more difficult. It's not the person. Okay. Jehovah's Witnesses, only because they seem to be stigmatized from exploring the reasons with people.
Yeah.
Which is really weird because they're always, seemingly promoting their beliefs. But they're very cautious about being on camera and being recorded. Were you there? I think you were there that day, Nathan, when I was on that campus in Portland. Yeah. And there were some Jehovah's Witnesses there. One of them walked up to me. I talked about this.
Oh, that's right. I nearly forgot about that because they never
she asked me to
interview.
She had never agreed. She just walked up. We started chatting before we knew it. I was doing SE. And she asked me to
she was doing the opposite. She was tabling herself. Like she was trying to draw people in and explain things to people. And here you were, very open and ready to receive a lot of information from them. And I think whether it's because you, I don't know, had a camera strapped around your chest, maybe that was part of it, or some other thing was happening here. I mean, I think you even mentioned like you wouldn't need to necessarily record the interview or post it anywhere, and they still would nonetheless not agree to talk to you. That's kind of strange.
Well, the deal there was that she was completely fine with me asking all the questions. I think it wasn't until she went back to the cart where another one of her
told her not to.
Partners said, "Hey, I suspect it was something like, you do realize he was recording you there, right?" Probably something to that effect. But to that question, it's not like Jehovah's Witnesses are more difficult to use this approach with. I'd ask the exact same questions regardless of your claim and what belief and anything. But it was the tribe's rules that were making it difficult. So that's what I'm trying to point out here, that certain tribes might have specific rules, like you shouldn't talk to people about that topic. And then if there's penalties, then you're going to encounter difficulties with this approach.
I think for myself, the answer is Jehovah's Witnesses and presuppositionalists for the same reason, that they have the most ingrained defenses against epistemology.
Yeah. And it might even be Scientologists too, because a lot of the conversations that we have get into the psychology of belief. And I think that's been stigmatized quite a bit in that culture. So
have any of you guys talked with a Scientologist?
Not about Scientology. All right, next question.
I've talked to ex-Scientologists. Not the same thing.
Same.
Can you speak briefly on pie charting the reasons why someone believes to help avoid a gish gallop? Steve. This one's pretty self-explanatory and basic to most people interested in SE, but we'll cover it. It's a great question. Basically, if you can ask somebody to list the top 3 or 4 reasons why they think something is true, you can ask how they're weighting those reasons. And then that helps you get a sense of which reason you might want to tackle first, depending on your goals. It's useful.
I just like the pie chart analogy because it makes it seem as if I could have 5 reasons, each of which would get me to 20% confidence that should get me to 100%. When in reality, I probably have 5 reasons, any one of which would get me over 50%, and I'm only at 80%. So they don't stack. Now, I might well have a reason that is the most convincing to me. So to sequence my reasons by order of impact, probably quite useful.
Yeah.
And then we could ask the question: if you didn't have just that reason, how much would that affect your confidence? And if we looked at all the different reasons and found the one that would affect the confidence the most, then you're good. But that doesn't neatly fit on a pie chart.
Pie charting can also be useful when you break the pie slices into categories, because you can have a category called personal experience, which covers 5 reasons that they have. But now you've just you've nicely tidied them up into one little package with a nice bow on it, and you're calling it personal experience. And so if you can recognize together that that's not a good reason for thinking that this is true to a high degree of confidence, you can set aside all 5 of those things with just that one pie slice. So thinking of your beliefs, or at least the confidence that contributes to your belief being true in those slices, can be really useful. This gets to the efficiency of SE. You can set aside lots of different things that have no bearing whatsoever on their confidence level. Would it be useful to come across as more tentative in your own beliefs? Yeah. If that's the case, like, don't fake it. I wouldn't advise faking it and pretending to be more open or tentative in your own position, but it's helpful if you can express that you are. Do you think it makes sense to practice on a less controversial topic, or should we jump into the God talk? The God talk may not be controversial to some people.
Yeah, I don't say that's the most controversial. I'd say that there's other conversations I've had that got way more heated than the God conversation.
Most people that think God is real don't see it as a controversial topic because they're so sure that it's true. And they often think that you think it's true, or you should think it's true.
Yeah. It may even be the easiest one to talk about.
It is an easy one to talk about.
Which is another reason why I would be encouraging of people practicing SE to eventually, if you have a long-term goal in mind, I mean, you do you, but I'd like to see SE as a movement on the internet grow more and more off into the weeds, into other subjects. My own opinion.
Yeah. And so this question, though, who is it controversial to? If it's controversial to you, then that's your problem that you need to deal with when that topic comes up. If it's controversial to your conversation partner, you're going to notice more defensiveness, and you might have to spend more time building rapport and trust.
Mm-hmm. I think the benefits of practice are not just to get the structure and to learn examples, but also to desensitize ourselves. So for the desensitization part of practice, the more controversial, the better. And in this case, I'm going to define controversial as the questioner and the claimant have very opposing views, whatever that might be.
Yeah. Anything else? That's a good question. What is the ultimate goal of street epistemology? Asks Todd.
That's a very good question.
I actually had my mind changed on this.
Well, let's hear it.
What was your view, and what is it now?
Okay, so I think before it was to resolve disputes of understanding, which was that was my favorite way of phrasing it. Or maybe it was resolve disputes, and I didn't add of understanding. And since I've thought clarity was more, when you two, I think it was both Reid and Anthony, said clarity, just a single word, I was like, yeah, that's probably it. And then my mind changed, and I was like, yeah, that is a better way, and more to the point. Clarity for them, clarity for myself. clarity on how to interpret words. It's like so many times we misunderstand words because I am assuming the other person's using the same word, has the same understanding for the same word as me, and we miss that. So clarity is probably,
that's a big goal for me. It's not just my own clarity, but giving them clarity into their own views.
Yeah, as a mirror to them.
Yeah.
I think the larger a larger goal is that so we can all live together and not kill each other.
Yeah. Let's solve these problems that are facing us.
Yeah,
right?
that's
That's
what inspired me to get into
critical
it.
thinking and having productive conversations when that isn't easy.
Reid?
Yeah, when it's not easy, yeah. That we can talk about anything.
Is it still clarity for you, or you shift onto something?
Yeah, it's Sam Harris has that quote about, there's only the alternative between conversation is violence. Like that's our dichotomy. And if we have that on a spectrum, violence on one end, maybe SE is like the most nonviolent thing that you can do to talk about, to manage conflict and to actually progress.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something that's really good.
The most nonviolent thing that is still productive. Yeah.
Yes. Right.
Are you guys getting a lot of pressure not to talk about certain topics with people, or that you'd be platforming them, or I don't know, showcasing bad ideas? I hear of people complaining about this stuff and getting deplatformed, but I haven't experienced it yet.
I have felt discouraged to post certain interviews, not because of anyone telling me, but because I felt that there might be a certain backlash or retribution for platforming a view that was unpopular. And even though my goal was to bring clarity to the idea and seek the ways in which to best understand it, even if it happened to be true, if it's controversial or it rubs people the wrong way, I may alienate some of my friends to surface the idea. And so I actually have a couple of interviews that are like that I haven't posted, not because they weren't good interviews, but because I feel self-aware in the way it may make some people feel. I mean, I know this sounds weird, but I've got relationships to keep. And so I'd rather broach those conversations.
A culture kind of thing. Is that what you're talking about? Like a
yeah.
Okay.
Also there's just woke culture stuff. Sure, identity issues usually are things that people will talk to me about.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is that concern at the back of my mind that maybe some video that I've uploaded could be weaponized to show, well, look at this dumb argument that this person has, and therefore I'm more justified in my position, that type of thing. I don't really want that to happen.
There really shouldn't be topics that are off limits unless there is an imminent harm to somebody by doing that show.
It's more like the public domain sort of thing. Like, yeah.
Okay, here's an example. I would not publicly live stream with somebody who was making the claim sex before 8 or it's too late. If somebody is publicly proclaiming that they want to do something that we have a big issue about and is very illegal, I don't want to discuss potentially having crimes.
Oh, 6 or 8. I
don't want to expose somebody. The sex before 8 or it's too late is NAMBLA.
I thought you were talking about 8 p.m. All right, I got you.
Not time of day.
All right, I got you.
Are you saying that you'd still talk with them, but you wouldn't do it in a video?
I would not do it publicly. I would not be willing to expose someone to the public situation of having them talk about wanting to do crimes or something of that order. No, I would have a private conversation, sure. And I would probably be very level-headed and calm about it. But no, I'm not going to put that on YouTube or for anywhere else public.
Anthony, have you ever had someone else lead the conversation, and what was that like for you? I'm wondering if someone who has been on the other side makes for a better facilitator. Yeah, I got a couple of videos on my channel with a guy. I don't remember his name now, but we were talking about atheism and veganism, and he was a bright young person who asked great questions.
Quid pro quo.
Quid pro quo is one of them, and I think the other one is an atheist gets cross because he wears a cross around his neck, even though he's an atheist. That was phenomenal.
It's funny though, because you say that you don't like to broach topics of veganism or something.
No, well,
but
it was
have a few.
I guess I was more enamored that this young guy was, stepping up to the challenge and asking me questions in return, and I was really enjoying it. But I don't want to have a continued discussion about that topic.
I see.
I'm wondering if someone who's been on the other side makes for a better facilitator.
Yes.
Someone who you've questioned is now questioning you back in return. Potentially, yeah, they're a potentially better conversation partner now because you've built trust. You've showed that you can listen to them. They're going to probably do that the same in return to you. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
In my experience, if people are only willing to play one side and not both, their growth in SE is much, much slower.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of two specific people. I'm not going to mention who they are. One who only does questioning and one who only does claims. And their growth is a lot slower than everybody else's.
Yeah. I'm curious who you're talking about, but I have a couple ideas. What do you suggest if there is no overlap on facts, for example, or in other words, they reject your sources and you reject theirs? What do you suggest if there's no overlap on facts? They reject your sources and you reject theirs, says Joshua.
Don't
our facts rarely come into it. Yeah.
Well, why are you both rejecting? That means both sides are arguing, right?
That's a different kind of conversation.
Yeah, if you're comparing the facts of the situation, then you're probably not doing SE.
It's so hard to shoot your messenger sometimes.
But there's a time and a place for this when you're ready for it, right? Like
when they ask for it.
Mm-hmm. What's the percentage of people who are dying from COVID? Like I'd really like to hear and see your facts for that. Because I'm not vested in it. I really want to understand what the truth is. But if I was really vested in it and we're both presenting our facts, that's where you're going to get the defensiveness. How do you respond to the other person when all their arguments are just based on faith and Bible stories? Asks Don. We can take Bible out of personal stories or stories from a book and faith. How do you respond when that's all their arguments are based on?
Outsider test questions, the feasibility questions. Just test that reason. Yeah. How well does it stand up on other claims?
Take their word for it.
There's at least a paragraph defining faith in there somewhere, because you need to have them define it. You don't want to define it for them. That's a fool's errand.
Good point.
Right. You can think of the pie chart. Like if those stories weren't there or faith wasn't available to you, would that affect your confidence in the truth of this claim? Figure out how much of a factor it is, and then if they assign a high value or if it would have an impact on them, you can pursue it.
Do you use that kind of faith anywhere else in your life?
Yeah. A lot of people think that when you get to faith, I've seen a lot of this, like, the conversation's over. There's nothing more you can do for them when they bring up faith. And that just baffles my mind. Like that's the beginning.
That's the start.
Potential. Yeah. That's the potential. Yeah. That's the start, or an indication that you're close to the end, depending on how they define it.
It depends on, for me, like how long of an interview am I doing? Am I on Discord with somebody? Am I in person with somebody? Are we like 3 hours into lunch? If so, then I bring up what outsider tests early on in the conversation. I like to be really transparent about the way I think or the way I like to dig into other people's ideas and appeal to their sense of whether or not outsider tests are a good way of thinking critically about our reasons. If they agree that they're a great way, then that's awesome. And then when I hear faith, I'll just say, hey, remember that outsider test from earlier as like a way to think about how we apply our reasons and how we would feel if other people use those same reasons? Well, could anyone use faith to conclude some other thing? Or
I often wonder about that, Nathan, about how useful it is to
Be
describe
too transparent.
what you're doing as you're doing it. Kind of having a meta talk and the talk at the same time, and if that is helpful. And I don't know. I think
I could see how it might make somebody more guarded, but I don't know. If somebody were transparent to me, like, and they were to tell me, like, this is one of the ways I think critically about ideas and my reasons for thinking things are true, then I could have a chance to agree or disagree to that. And were somebody to pull that on me in a conversation, I would concede the point probably. But then again, you know, that's an outsider test for that situation. And it's possible that somebody else is not having that mentality.
I found that going meta on the conversation where you're completely setting aside the topic and you're just talking about talking, that enhances the conversation. Yeah. It's incredibly useful and beneficial for both people when you do that.
I'm asking this question, and this is why I'm asking this question, kind of thing.
That's like a long-term conversation, usually for 5 to 10 minutes. I wouldn't be so like super transparent about like the way I think, because I'm not gonna talk about me. I'm gonna talk about them and their ideas most for that 10 minutes. If it's a long two-way conversation and it's back and forth and it comes up, then it's good to be transparent from my point of view.
Yeah.
What else we got?
Under the moral implications heading, if you get the reason, I fear oblivion, are you ready for that? So I think maybe, what do you do when somebody says that I'm afraid of not having this belief, maybe? Is that a fair rewrite of that?
No, I think I fear oblivion.
This is where SD becomes psychological.
I fear death. I fear the cessation of everything.
That means if there's no heaven, then I don't live on, kind of thing, or
oblivion. Yeah.
I mean, are you ready for that?
Is,
you should be ready. You need to be ready for that, because that often comes up.
And this
sure.
is important,
and I can have compassion for that. Yeah, I can see fearing oblivion. Totally.
Yeah.
If there was oblivion, would that change the way you live your life? And how would that change the way you live your life? If there was an end to your consciousness, then would certain things lose value to you? What would those things be?
Or gain value?
Or gain value?
Change?
Would life be more precious if this wasn't a place for you to wipe your feet before the real life? If this was the one life, how would that change the way you think about this life?
Completely different, right?
I just heard counter-apologetic language.
This is only in response to somebody saying that they fear oblivion.
Totally.
I would be like, so why do you fear oblivion? Does that? Yeah, there's lots of questions that can come out of that.
Sure.
I love those. Actually, more meta. What are the consequences of my mind being changed? Those are some of my favorite
I like those
lines of questioning.
Yeah.
Do you know anyone that doesn't fear oblivion? How do you think that they're managing? What are you missing if you were to one day align with their views? Like, how would you get there? What would change in your life?
I think I could even do an outsider test for like a universalist or an annihilationist, somebody who believes we go to heaven or we go to not. That hell is oblivion, not eternal conscious torment. So if they think that souls are indestructible, can you imagine somebody who believes we go to heaven, but if we go to hell, we're just destroyed and it's all poof?
Or
how would they act different?
How do you feel
how
about?
How would they see this moral implication?
Yeah. How do you feel
Somebody's
about
sort of in their camp?
How do you feel about having no consciousness before you were born? That oblivion.
That's actually a more interesting conversation for me. I'm far more interested in how do people choose to be in the predicament they are in at birth, and if not, what are the consequences of that? To me, that's more of like a meta conversation about compassion.
I think I would explore the fear. Like, why are you afraid of that? Why are there some people that are not afraid of it?
I know a lot of reincarnation-minded Jewish Buddhists who would not say that we were not conscious before.
I don't even know what that means.
A Jewish Buddhist? Oh, Jew-boos are common in my part of the world. Apparently, Judaism and Buddhism are not conflicting enough that somebody can't hold both of those in their head at once.
Cool.
Huh.
Last
Yeah,
question.
Jew-boos are very common in some.
We made it to the end.
Yeah.
Dang, great job. All right. Have you considered how one might apply these or similar principles to public communication for larger groups? For example, Facebook groups, says Miko. I'm thinking of a scenario where the aim of the administrator would be optimal communication of scientifically skeptical thinking about a false belief on some topic or another.
I'm reminded of Pierce Watkins' recent 3-minute request to somebody public. I'm forgetting to the conservative voice. And he does a street epistemology approach requesting that she respond. Might this be like that? He uses SE in an outside of an SE context.
Can you go back to the previous? Have you considered how one might apply these principles of street epistemology to public communication for larger groups? That would be good, because his request to interview that one specific person might bring people from that specific tribe forward to speak on that person's behalf.
Sure.
So you could, I liked Pierce's video. That was a different take on SE.
We have
How would you scale this for groups, I think, is what this question is getting to.
we have a Practice SE Facebook group that was there for a while, but now it's mostly on Discord, people doing it in text. So I think Discord is your best bet for, large groups. SE practice sessions are what it's all about really right now.
And for clarity, 95% of SE practice happens in voice, and a small percentage of it happens in text.
I have an unreleased video I've been thinking about making public. I just haven't made it. I don't know why I haven't made it public. I just haven't gotten around to it. But where I interviewed with the survey, I interviewed like 30 people at once.
Oh yeah.
And then when somebody had an objection to it, I was able to see who that might be. And I was like, anybody disagree to that? Like, apparently 20% of you disagree to it. Does anyone mind raising your hand?
Detail? Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool.
And then when that happened, somebody else could chime in who I was like, does anyone agree, that could ask a question to illuminate why there's a disagreement here? And then somebody else would bring it up, and I just have them ask each other questions to better understand. And it became
Was this in a Zoom call that you did about a 20-minute thing ahead of?
Yeah, it was like this summer. It was like a 3-hour thing.
Yeah,
it was a lot
I think
of fun.
you shared that with me. I really liked it. I hope that goes public.
Yeah, we polled everybody. We didn't get through most of it, and I allowed one person to kind of take up a lot of time. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I didn't post it. I was like not sure. Yeah, I could edit some of it down a little bit. The survey is really helpful.
I'm reminded of a Facebook group that this person, her name is Karen Tamarius, and she Tamerius, and she has a Facebook page with people from all different types of political persuasions, and she encourages them to come online, and she does video chat hangouts, and she explores claims of people who are very pro-Trump or very pro-Bernie or whatever. I think she focuses more on Trump people who are conservatives, I should say, Trump people. She tries to teach the desired approach, which is very similar to SE. And then she tries to remind the participants to adhere to that. And that's probably a really good example where these principles or this approach of communication is attempting to be scaled for larger groups. I don't know how successful she is and how we would define success and all that other stuff, but yeah, it could be done. But we tend to use it in our own SE groups, don't we? But we need to spill it out beyond the SE community. We need your group on archery practice, right? Should probably be incorporating some of these ideas.
Yep. 1 minute until 3 hours. Wow, we did it. We did a Rogan.
Excellent. All right, well, let's wrap it up. I want to thank CFI one more time for inviting me to give this talk. Non-confrontational discussions. You can find it on their channel. They have a web page. I think my slides. Yep, I'm looking at the website. You can download my webinar slides, and then we'll have a link to this video, which is the remainder of the questions that I couldn't get to. Now, this was really cool. Thank you for helping me. That was like a stressful thing because I didn't want to leave those folks hanging, and I thought if I did something myself, it would be a year before I got to it. And I'm really glad that you guys helped me answer those questions. And hopefully that's valuable for people.
Seemed like the perfect format. Yeah.
How do people reach you? You guys want to plug your stuff?
All our links are in the description, and channel names are right here. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And come to the SE Discord. We do good things there.
Yes. As you can tell, a lot of the questions, the response was find the communities of people meeting to talk about SE and get involved and engaged, and you'll start learning how to navigate this stuff.
Yeah. And if you have an iOS device, join Clubhouse, and we're doing more SE stuff there. It's really cool.
Yeah, we created
and
a
remember
club.
to go to Nathan's channel and subscribe and ding the bell.
Ding the bell. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you and I have had that conversation. Definitely subscribe.
Oh yeah, it's an ongoing
follow us.
headbanging that you and I are having, which is very friendly and pleasant and fun.
Oh, are you guys in a competition for subscribers?
No.
How about this?
No. I hold.
If we ask the audience,
that
if we ask the audience
Yeah.
to like this video, and they happen to like it more than the other videos, would that change your confidence that asking the audience to like our videos would be a good idea?
I think it's a bad thing because overall engagement fraction goes down. Pine
Oh,
Creek is my example.
Engagement goes down? Okay. If we
Yes,
get more
if you have
likes and more
subscribers
views,
that only subscribe to you because you asked, they are less engaged than people who did it on their own. And Pine Creek is my data.
So
you mean for like people who follow in the comments and stuff?
You want the super fans, the people who are most engaged, to subscribe.
I want the people that are the most engaged who don't have to be reminded
Ah,
to subscribe. And therefore my engagement relative to my subscribers is
Yeah.
higher.
yeah.
Okay.
My
Okay.
proportional engagement is higher because I have the diehards.
You want people to want to watch your stuff, not have to cajole people into liking your stuff.
Yeah.
And I expect only a small fraction of people are actually nudged away from their normal behavior by that, but it's enough to show up in your stats.
And if you've made it this far, you are a super SE fan.
Yeah.
Holy
Yeah.
crap.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
You're
Yeah.
awesome
Yeah.
and amazing. Thank you.
I wanna hang
Street
out with you.
Epistemologist.
You've reached master level.
Mhm. Heck yeah.
That being said, thank you everyone for watching. This was really fun to sit down with some of my friends and go over these questions that we tend to get and get a little bit more of a different perspective on it. Thanks a lot. We'll do this
Looking
again.
for the
maybe.
next time.
Yeah.
Yeah.